Good morning and welcome to Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg and it is the 11th day of December 2024. Welcome to our show today. So we start the day off with Liberty Essentials with Bill Mohr, Karen the Riveter, and Ralph the IT guy at 9 o'clock. And at 10 o'clock, Shawn Starry is going to be on. Now he is the producer and director of a documentary called Panhandle. Panhandle is all about the Texas wildfires, and we got to look at whether directed energy weapons were involved in this, because I don't know about you. I'm kind of suspicious of everything I see. I don't take anything at face value anymore. And I'm willing to listen to everything, which I think is the only way we get to the truth. So we're gonna go down that path and look at directed energy weapons. I've been interested in them for many years, so I think this is going to be pretty fun today. And with that, good morning, guys. How you doing?
Morning.
Good morning.
Well, good morning. Yesterday we had a problem. For some reason, the sound went out and I reset up the broadcast a couple of times trying to get this thing to work, but it was some sort of an outside attack and or a problem. So there was really nothing we could do, but we are figuring out ways to get around the problem if it happens next time. So our guests that were on, the whistleblowers to blow the lid off of this Hillman cult. And we talked when we got offline. This is one of the most evil things I think I have ever seen in my life. I'm not kidding you. They're going to come back on Friday. And they said too that they have been absolutely targeted as they've exposed this cult and this cult, Hillman, this cult leader. It is one of the vilest things. And the reason why I find it to be so vile is because they are making allegations against Jesus Christ, and their dive into this seems to lead to pedophilia, and for their own sick, demented, weird, disgusting goals that they have, which is it's clear they want access to children and to normalize pedophilia. So when we look into this on Friday, I think it's going to open a lot of people's eyes on what the agenda truly is behind some of the things that we're seeing out there. And it's shocking.
Yeah, it's really incredible how many people are tied into that. People that a lot of people wouldn't even expect. It extends beyond any. Well, none of it's reasonable, but beyond any comprehension of the depth that these people will go. And now it's not even hidden. A lot of this is made public, right? And especially through Hollywood, even movie films, right? They're telling the people what they're doing, and a lot of people just don't catch on to it. And it's absolutely sickening that this has become so blatantly public that it almost becomes accepted in the eyes of the people.
Well, now they're twisting scripture in ways that only Satan could do that, in the ways that they're approaching this. When I started listening to this, I also have some clips of this nut job who's trying to suck people into his absolute demented thought process. It's a cult. There's no two ways about it. It is a cult. But how these people suck other people in is what's shocking. And I think it's something we really need to look into, because these religious cults aren't the only cults that we have out there. A cult is out there to manipulate the behavior of the people that they can suck into the way that they think. It's, in my opinion, a lot of the secret societies, not even religious ones that claim to be religious, function the same way, but so do the political ones. And it's hard for people to come to terms with the fact that they are in fact in something that is functioning like a cult, or has the same characteristics of controlling people as a cult would, as a religious cult. And it becomes a religion, though it's not billed as such. So, and sometimes religions parade as a religion when they're in fact a military operation. And I would wager to say that most of what's going on in the Middle East, BLM, Antifa, all of those things go back to a political, quasi-military agenda to carry out very, very evil purposes. And I think we need to be realistic with this and realize, open our eyes and look at things at face value for what they are really doing out there, instead of just going, going to believe it hook, line, and sinker. Because we all need to be watchful for this, and we need to study. In my opinion, we need to study the plans of evil to know what they're doing and be able to spot it before it sucks us or people in around us into this. One of the big things that came up was how the gaming software, in particular Discord, is full of these type of people who are grooming children and younger people into participating into very, very evil activities. This is what we're going to talk about on Friday, which I think we can talk about another thing very quickly. We're going to touch on this because I want to touch on this later. The collapse of the government of Germany and France, and then also what's been happening in Syria. This is kind of crazy if you think about it, that in 10 days, all of a sudden, this horrific conflict is all of a sudden, boom, gone, quiet. Assad's now up in the Soviet Union. Christians are being slaughtered in the streets. And why is it that our country will import every other sad sob story on the planet, but sits here silently while Christians are being slaughtered in Syria? And then the question of what is the connection with Netanyahu there? Netanyahu and Israel is under the direct attack of being bombed. And my question is are they looking at this as a place to stash Israelis as the bombs fall on Israel? We have to ask those questions, because there's no sense to any of this. There's too much that doesn't make sense to me at any rate. And I really think that we need to be a little bit, hold on here before we jump on to any narrative that's out there and question everything.
Yep, that's a big point of it. Everybody's got to be willing to actually look at the facts and look at the details. And everybody's going to make their own judgment call based on what they see, right? What we're told, what we hear, what we look at, what we find. And everybody's going to make that judgment call. But that's specifically what our Lord talks about in Matthew 7, right? Don't just stop at the first verse, continue on the rest of the chapter, because we are to judge, and we're to judge by the fruit of those that we're looking at. But we are to judge with righteous judgment, as in we're not taking these things and comparing them to the culture of the day, what the culture says is right or wrong, because that's completely irrelevant to any action we should be taking. But rather, as a righteous judgment, we should be judging by the judge's word himself, right? Take it in context. Look at the law. Look at the scriptures. What do they say about it? Because they both coincide with each other, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago with Blackstone.
Let's look at Germany and France a minute before we move on to that next topic. The German government basically collapsed the day after President Trump was voted in as the next president of the United States, and the rightful president of the United States right now, I might add. But they collapsed that next day. France is also in collapse. And I believe that a lot of this is due to the promised tariffs that President Trump has said he was going to do. And this is one of the things that I love, and I've always loved about President Trump. He knows how to use the tools at hand. Now, that doesn't mean that I agree with all the tools, that, the executive orders and that sort of thing, but he does know how to use those tools to turn them around. And the way he uses tariffs is brilliant. With the tariffs that we have, we can upend any country in the entire world, because every one of them is dependent on the United States subsidies. So if you've got a president in there that can, I don't know, I guess the great way to say it is put a bit in the mouth of the beast and turn this thing around for the American people, he's the greatest president the United States has ever had, because of the fact that this is a thousand-year-old death cult that we've come up against that goes after economic capture, that sets up proxy governments. Ukraine's a proxy, so is 23 of the countries in South and Central America, as well as I'd say the majority of the world right now. They're proxy countries. They're not even real countries anymore. And we can't even think about them with geographic boundaries because they don't, because it's an economic powerhouse that runs the world. And if he can bring this to its knees, including and watching exactly what's happened in Germany and France, God bless him. Because you follow the money every single time, you're going to find out exactly why they're killing people, who they're killing, what side of the conflict is on, who's making money in the military industrial complexes, government contractors, and the inside and out, the public-private partnerships, and all of this nonsense that's going on. It's follow the money. And just by those three issues alone, Syria, France, and Germany, we can see the Trump factor is already in place, and these people are running scared.
Germany's was pretty much directly due to the threat of tariffs, from what I understand, because their system is very much more centered around parties, and their election system is different, where they end up getting proportional representation for the different parties. It's a little different and unfamiliar. You really kind of need to look at it in a little more detail to understand it. However, the primary thing that kind of collapsed their government is, and it's not so much collapsed as just completely paralyzed, but it's being referred to as a collapse because they have no power right now, is that the two primary parties that were forming a coalition there, which is how they get a majority in basically their version of a parliament to be able to get anything done. That coalition kind of fell apart because of a disagreement between the two major parties that comprised that coalition about how to deal with the incoming tariffs from Trump. And
President Trump, I'm going to correct you.
Yes, President Trump. And so basically one of the parties was saying that Germany should take out a lot more national debt to be able to keep operating with the expenses that they already had. The other party said, no, that's unconstitutional with the German constitution. We are not allowed to take out that much debt in one go. And so we need to cut our spending. They couldn't come to an agreement, and it basically just kind of split the coalition there to the point where there isn't really a sound majority in their version of parliament anymore. So they can't really get anything done. It's kind of, and then on top of it, because of that split, a whole bunch of the, I would call them kind of equivalent to cabinet level positions,
resigned.
Left.
Did they resign? And
Yep.
they just left. They walked.
They resigned, and because they, as I understand it, they can't really be reappointed until there is a majority coalition in the version of parliament that they have. Effectively, a lot of those departments also can't get anything done because they have no one in the position of authority because they all resigned. So, I mean, not all of them, but most of them associated with the one party resigned.
This is a direct Trump factor right there.
President
Trump, thank you. This is a direct President Trump correlation right there. And why, from the beginning, I've said he is a master at using these systems that are out there and turning them against the enemy. You're not going to walk in there and say, okay, everybody, let's play nice. We're going to do this differently, because they are so entrenched. You've got to play a little bit of game theory with them and be smarter with them and use their tools against them to take them down. And he knows exactly what he's doing. And I will maintain that position on the greatest president in the history of the United States, President Donald Trump.
But you look at that too, and you look at the threat of tariffs. not even that they're installed yet, but the threat of tariffs toppling the government of Germany. And also, I don't quite
Probably
understand the
France.
mechanics of it. I don't quite understand the mechanics of it fully yet, but France, I believe, was also destabilized due to the, I think, if I remember right, I think the cause of that was also the threat of tariffs. Not even the tariffs being instituted, but the threat of them. And realizing that their countries are going to be bankrupt if these tariffs go into effect. That just kind of means that the only reason that these countries are staying solvent is because of U.S. money.
Absolutely. And I want you to think about this with Syria too. So they've given general amnesty to any of the soldiers who fought for the Assad government. He's up in Moscow, which tells me I'm kind of a fan of Putin. Okay. I like some of the things Putin's done. He's gotten rid of all of the bad additives in the food, which we still have. And he has people on small local farms. So he has decentralized the way that the government there runs, which makes me say, and he's also been blowing up the United States, created bio labs, which we had like 350 of them around the globe at last count. He's gotten rid of some of them. I'm not saying that there aren't some ulterior motives there. Okay. I'm not going to say that. Are they evil? I don't know. I can't judge that right now. But at any rate, there's been some real positive things. You always see positives and negatives together. There's no two ways about it. Nobody's perfect. But with giving amnesty to the soldiers that fought for Assad, and then Assad up in Moscow, they hadn't executed him yet. They're in this resolving in like say 10 days. The question is was this entire thing already planned out ahead of time?
Mm-hmm.
And why are the Christians being executed and slaughtered there? Why is it that Israel is already, it looks like they're already setting up some of these blast-free zones? How in the world can Israel walk into Syria and just say, okay, guys, we're in charge now? So who the heck was backing the rebels? Was it Great Britain or was it Israel? And were they looking for a place to stash Israelis when somebody over there gets mad at Israel and starts bombing Israel? There's a question.
So that's kind of been one of the highlights, right? The nation of Israel, as it currently stands, has always been one of the highlights, and the evangelical Christians have been kind of just up in arms in defense of that 100% of the way.
And giving them protected category, which is
Yep.
wrong on all levels. No one should ever have that because it should be judged on the basis of good versus evil. End of story. I don't care what people identify as.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a whole other topic, and we can actually do that at some point because I've done shows on that before. But going back a little bit, when we're talking about other nations and being able to set up tariffs and such to correct the actions of other nations, right? That is definitely within the purview of the federal government to do such things, and in a lot of cases should be, right, when it becomes a national problem to Americans. However, there is the process that we as Americans and our government should not be policing the world, right? We should not
Agreed.
be going out there and telling countries how they have to run. Only when it becomes a problem to our national interest is that to be used, and the funding of the federal government, right? That's a perfect use for tariffs in very mild form. If we had proper tariffs, let's put it this way: if we had proper tariffs for imports and such from other countries, there would be absolutely no reason for the income tax to exist, right? Because it doesn't anyway. But all of that can go away, right? You can easily cut 40% of the federal budget overnight if correctly set up, or if you correctly set up tariffs to fund it. Right.
Well, if you stop all of the funding for the UN and every other nation on the planet where we are literally funding their economy.
Well, and two, you look
then we would have this country righted so fast.
You look at what you said there too about not wanting to be the world's police, and that it's not proper for us to be the world's police. And it's amazing how quickly that attitude has changed, because you look at the period around World War I, World War II, there was a huge isolationist attitude that we shouldn't be even getting involved in the world wars, because they are, initially for World War I and II, that they were just purely a European conflict, and that we shouldn't be getting involved in that. There was a huge sentiment for that.
Bankers' wars. They're bankers' wars, and people from money. They make money.
And I would agree 100% with that, Kyle. Or I would agree 100% with that. That things like that don't even need to exist. There's a difference between these wars that we had, these unconstitutional wars, or like you just called them, Donna, bankers' wars, right? There are people making billions of dollars off every war that we've been in since, oh, good grief, since I have ever researched the history of wars, right? Even in what they call the Civil War, which was nothing civil about it. I'm sick of using that term. It was actually a war of the states of the Union. It was insurrection of the federal government against the people of the state. Okay, that's what I like to call it. But there were people already handling that war, trying to set up factions and derive money and funds as long as the war would exist, right? No difference with World War II. That was a huge one, right? And then every war or conflict, as they like to call it, beyond that, there have been handlers and people that play both sides of it that fund it, right? World War II specifically. How many people know that was Prescott Bush, right? Daddy Bush there. How many people know that he was funding Hitler's regime from the United States?
The Nazi banker. I mean, these people were so entrenched. And the Bushes, that wasn't even their real name. They changed their names like most of the people involved. They change it from one last name to another. The Windsors weren't British either. They came in and changed their names.
Yeah. So it's that kind of thing to look out for. The Constitution is pretty clear. If the people, through their representatives, do not declare war, we have no war, right? And I don't know of many people that would actually declare to go to war a lot of these times in all these little conflicts, if they knew the truth behind them, right? All we're doing is fighting war based on politics, on policy. And there's a huge problem with that.
I say we go after the people within the United States and the intelligence community who have committed acts of treason as well as crimes against humanity, and make sure they're on the first plane to get Mo and let them face the consequences for the crimes that they've committed.
Well, the way to stop that, there's an easy way to stop these stupid wars. And if you look at the way that the founding of the nation happened, even in the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, et cetera, at the beginning history of this nation, when a war was declared and just had to be done, right? If we were facing a conflict of an invading army, whether it be Britain or I don't think France was ever really a problem for us, but Mexico during the Texas separation of Mexico there. All of that, when they would declare that war, the people declaring it would be the first willing to fight it, right?
Yeah, I was actually just looking for, there was a proposed constitutional amendment, I think in 1916. I was looking for the text of that.
Yeah. If the people would get that mindset, if the federal government wants to go into war with another country or go into a so-called conflict in some other area of the world, then the representatives ought to go first. Send them. If they want to be the one to fund it and they want to be the one to put it up, they need to be the first to volunteer. I'll tell you what, if I was in the House of Representatives and Congress, that would be my stand. If we're going to declare war, I will gladly throw up my arms and I will take all of my gear and I will be the first to go in defense of my people, right? That mindset hardly ever exists anymore. And that's the issue we have with wars, right? Like I said, there's a difference between these wars and conflicts we see today and righteous wars, right? going back a little bit to what you were talking about, when we talk about policing the world, I have a huge issue with that. Even if we're gonna try to correct the actions of a nation and bring it back into a rightful standing with the United States, we have a bigger issue, and that is the United States is not in a rightful standing with the U.S. people, right? Um, we're busy going over trying to correct other nations. We're sending our boys, our men, and our women over to other nations to bleed and die, right? And in the meantime, our nation's falling to pot, right? I have a huge problem with that.
For conflict that can be settled most of the time by diplomacy.
Oh yeah, most of the time, yeah. And then
Most
if
of the
not,
time.
and they're not a threat to us, so be it, right? The nations are going to destroy themselves. We're not there to set up nations or to tear down nations, even though that's what America has been good at over the last 150 years or so, right? That's a whole nother issue and a whole nother problem that we face as Americans.
That's a huge problem and a huge issue, though, because that is what's been going on.
Yeah, and that's a globalist mentality, right? That's why immediately, like I don't know, 70 years ago or 50 years ago, whenever it was, we should have pulled out of the UN, right? That's a huge issue because it's a globalist society, right? It's a cult that's unmanaged by the people that set up their own laws, regulations. I mean, how many people know that there's an international building code, right? That's one that hits me all the time. And that's oftentimes enforced, especially in large metropolitan areas. They use an international building code, which is a building code set up for the world, right? Nobody sees a problem with this, but I have a huge problem with it. I refuse to abide by it. I don't care who says what. I'm not gonna follow that.
Well, the treaties that they've signed should be, most of them, absolutely nullified. They were set up very poorly, and what we've gone through with Vicki Davis and the technocratic communism is the La Paz Treaty that really ruined the southern border. And that happened, I believe that happened in, I'll look up the date on that one, but that was the start of watching things go to NAFTA, etc. I mean, it was a slow roll through these treaties to tear down the United States and usurp our government with an international, undeclared presence, the globalist crime syndicate.
Yeah. Now, one thing about NAFTA, that's exactly what I was going to go into, actually. One thing about NAFTA, that was a huge highlight over the last, I don't know, 20 years or so in my lifetime. That was one of the big things. We need to get out of NAFTA, right? We need to get rid of that agreement and move on. And one thing that President Trump had done in his last term, right, was eliminate NAFTA, right? We're all aware of that. That was a big highlight. However, how many people actually looked into what it became? Has anybody read the text of the USMCA that replaced NAFTA? If we haven't, we need. How many
people have even read the Constitution to begin with?
Well, I know.
You're like raising the bar there, Bill, for everybody. But of course, La Paz was signed in 1983, August 14th, by the way.
Yeah. But the USMCA that replaced NAFTA is actually hardly any different than what NAFTA is. In fact, the majority of the text is verbatim the NAFTA text. Plus, it adds another, it's been commonly called, it adds another 10% of sold out sovereignty, right? I have a huge problem with the USMCA. I deem it worse than what NAFTA was in all honesty. But there's a ton of that going on as we look at the face value of things instead of actually looking deeper into what it is. And I catch a lot of flack for this, right? Because you know me, Don. I'll call out any president. I don't care who it is, right? And I've called out President Trump on a lot of different things. And I was one of the very few to say that President Trump should have been impeached on numerous accounts, none of which they tried to impeach him for, right? All of the impeachment proceedings against President Trump were absolute. It was just like you would say, a dog and pony show, right? It was all just a show of the people to keep playing the two-party system. That's all it was, right? There was no difference when you look at it. However, there were a ton of other things. The USMCA was one of them. The infringement against the Second Amendment was another one of them. The infringement against the First Amendment was another one of them. And they're all just tons of little things that the people let slide because other things were happening. And I'm not willing to let anything slide, because a lot of our founding fathers, the reason why we had the impeachment process in the Constitution was that all civil officers, including president and vice president as listed, should be impeached for the smallest of offenses, right? We read that treason, bribes, high crimes, and misdemeanors are in there. One example I like to say, in the state of Michigan, a lot of people don't know this. Let's look at one misdemeanor, right? And this is going to get some people up because a lot of people don't know this either. When we put the bottle deposit, everybody knows we have a bottle deposit in Michigan, right? We pay 10 cents extra for a piece of plastic to hold liquid. And then when we drink the liquid, we are supposed to save the plastic and return it so it can be recycled. Seems like a great idea, right? It's just a way to get the people back into recycling mode. Number one, they didn't have the authority to do it. We never delegated that authority to them. Besides that point, our legislature went farther into statute and added that it was a misdemeanor to not return bottles with deposit. How many people know that? It's a misdemeanor if you drink a Coke and then you throw the Coke can in the garbage, right? It's a crime. It's a misdemeanor. Think about that for a minute when you're talking impeachments, high crimes and misdemeanors as well, right? That includes throwing a Coke can in a garbage can.
Well, now
they want to add it to water.
They've got so many laws and such out there that you are always, everyone's in violation of something at every point in your life, and they're just using it for harassment.
Yeah, but everybody should read the book 3 Felonies a Day. That'll kind of open your eyes to this nonsense pretended legislation that our founding fathers called it.
I don't know how.
For a minute, this is constitutionfacts.com, and here's 1916. And thank you, Ralph, for posting this. All acts of war should be put to national vote. Anyone voting yes to register as a volunteer for service anyone voting yes had to register as a volunteer for service in the United States Army. There it is.
Now, the principle behind that is correct, right? You look back at the early wars, and yeah, the people would stand up when they realized that it was a war that had to be fought. The people would stand up and do it. Putting it to a national vote, however, should not be. Our representatives should remain in charge of declaring war. Elsewise, we have nothing but a democracy, and 51% of the people can tear the country down into war, right? So that's a problem. But as far as the people voting yay should register for the military, volunteer, right? That's no longer volunteer, but rather it becomes the authority that if you want a war, you have to volunteer for it. There are some people who would say yes to certain wars that are incapable of volunteering. So I'm not sure the text of that amendment, but in its title form, there are some large issues with that, right?
Well, the other thing is that if you have things like that by vote, like a popular vote, if it is a unrighteous cause that somebody has absolutely done a narrative on and sucked people in on, there's no one to hold accountable.
Yeah, and that's the problem with democracy.
Problem.
That is the problem with democracy. That's why democracy does not thrive anywhere in the world. They will always collapse. That's why we set up government. That's why we set up representatives, and for the most part, except for communists and dictatorships, monarchies, such like that across the world, most other governments are set up as a representative style government, right? Unfortunately, a lot of them don't have the securities and law that we have here in America as a republic. There's a little bit of a difference there, but yeah, that's the whole point. If we want it, we have to be willing to fight it, right? That's pretty simple when it comes down to war. I'm one of those, I'm willing. If we have to go do something, let's just go do it. Let's handle it. You read all through the scriptures where God's people had to do such things, right? Even against their own brethren. Remember in the book of Judges where they had to go after the Benjamites, right? And day after day, they failed and lost tens of thousands of men even doing so. But they were still called to do it. And in the end of the day, they won. Right? The problem was solved. The point was made that this is not going to be tolerated. And then in the end, everybody was brought back together, and it's kind of a weird situation. You read the end of the book of Judges, and you realize that they decimated the Benjamites to the point where there weren't even any more women or children. Right? There were just like 600 men hidden out in a cave. So the Benjamites were done. They were history. They wouldn't have existed except the men of the other tribes came back together and said, you know what, we can't have this. They're still part of us, and we need to make sure that they remain part of us. So they allowed their women, their ladies, out there and told the Benjamites that they're going to be out there dancing, and you can take whoever you want, and we'll just turn a blind eye toward it. It's a really weird story, but nonetheless, they did what
I can't say anybody did anything right in that situation. Okay, there's no way I'm jumping on that and saying, we're just going to throw the women out there like a bunch of cattle. Just take whoever you want. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's very strange. But in the end, they had to do what they had to do to keep the nation alive and remaining, right? But the point was they saw an issue, right? The Benjamites had violated the law and doing certain things, and so they went and they requested of the Lord, what are we going to do? And they were told to go fight with your brothers, because what they did was a transgression, and that was the end of it. It was quick, it was swift, rapid, and the issue was handled. Right? That should be no less than our thought process when we talk about wars. Right? Is it something that affects us? Is it something that's going to cause us harm? And if it is, then let's go take care of it. Right? If it's another country, right? Let's get back into that a minute. If it's another country that is fighting their own war, or even fighting among themselves, right? If they're having a so-called civil war, if they're having a war of their people, like Somalia did not too terrible long ago, and I don't know the end outcome of that, but that's not something we should entangle ourselves with. However, there is no reason why Americans can't volunteer to go fight such things either, right? A lot of them did that over in Ukraine. I think they did it for a horrible purpose without looking at the context of what was going on. But a lot of people will go over and help nations fight their other wars. Absolutely. If that's your prerogative, go do it. But as far as a nation, we should not be dragging ourselves into wars that we have no business getting into. Yeah, go ahead, Ralph.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and finish your thought. I had another thought about your NAFTA discussion earlier too.
Oh, well, I was just going to jump into another thought to carry on the conversation. But yeah, go ahead. We'll jump back into NAFTA.
Yeah. So regarding what you said about NAFTA basically just being rewritten and passed again, we really had the same thing with the ACA for Obamacare. That as much opposition as there was for Republicans against that, the ACA was mostly in some cases it was nearly verbatim what was introduced by Republicans just a few years before that.
Yeah, and that's the way they play the game. That is their politics, and that is what keeps the two parties in the system, right? It's not one playing the other as much as it is one setting up for the other.
This is like a team. There's no two ways about it.
Not a Republican in the world would have. Okay, there may have been a couple. I shouldn't say that because I didn't see the vote count. But for the most part, the Republican Party in its entirety would have decimated Obamacare had they been in the majority, right? I think we can agree on that without actually looking at the vote count. But they would have decimated it. But because the other party was in power, they set it up, right? And then, so now you have the people divided on that issue, right? Because it was heavy during Obamacare. It was heavily divided. I remember fighting that at the IRS level when they came after me for not having it, right? By the way, I won. I still didn't. But nonetheless, then when they redid this, like you were just talking about, Ralph, they redid it and brought it in from the Republican side. Well, the Democrats aren't going to go against it. They're going to put up a show to say that they oppose it because it was a Republican's idea. But in its entirety, it was just a continuation, but it had to be done from the Republican side. That way, both people both divided people will say, "Oh yeah, see, our guys did this. Ours is much better than yours."
Yeah,
without
but
even going in and reading.
Obamacare, the ACA, because I don't like to call it that because it was a Republican effort originally. It was introduced by the Republicans originally before it got passed and reintroduced and passed as the ACA. It was originally introduced by the Republicans as basically kind of an industry handout to the insurance industry. And you look at how much money was funneled to the insurance industry by that, it's incredible. So it got shot down after the Republicans introduced it. And then it basically came back almost verbatim as the ACA. And Obama made a big show of passing that. And it's Obamacare. And then the Republicans were all against it when just right before then, they were the ones that were fighting for the exact same thing. And they were the ones that introduced it onto the floor. So what did we end up with? We ended up with a big insurance industry handout, exactly like everybody wanted. And we got a big conflict and a big show that they could put out there to the public when everybody was involved in it.
Yep.
Bingo.
That's how the game is played right there. So the reason why we say such things, right? Calling out people, calling out these parties, calling out individuals for crimes and actions. I've been told before, it's like, man, all you do is continually razz on people. Well, that's not the case because obviously you don't know me in person. But when it comes
when their behavior changes, how's that?
Yeah, you don't just razz on people. You razz on people, systems, anything.
When it comes to public figures and they make public actions, it calls for a public calling, right? If you want to do something personally against me, the other three people on the screen will never hear about it, right? If you and I can handle it. If you can't, eventually it'll become out in public. But if you do something personally against me, nobody will know about it until you hear me come to you, right? Read Matthew 18. That's the way we do things. As a public figure, when you're addressing the entire nation publicly, you get called out publicly, right? Welcome to the world. That's just the way things work. That's the way it happens. And that's the way it has to continue to happen. One example of that, or actually a couple examples of that. We'll do this. Because a lot of people say, well, that's kind of Old Testament stuff. When you're going after people and trying to, I had a pastor tell me, we shouldn't be trying to Christianize the nation. I was like, I don't understand where you're coming from because that's the original foundation of this nation. I'm just trying to keep it that way, right? I'm not trying to make something new. I want to just retain it to where it was. That way we can all have liberty. So an example of that early on in the New Testament, what did we see of John the Baptist, right? Remember, who did John the Baptist go to? Did he go to his friend who was committing a transgression? Did he go to a stranger that was committing it? No, he went to the king or to the governor, right? He went to Herod, the highest public figure in that area, and called him out for taking his brother's wife. Right? A lot of people just let that slide, but that is unlawful. Still is unlawful today, right? Even in this country, in our laws, that is unlawful, right? As it was then. He went right to him and called him out on it. Okay, that's just one quick example. You can go outside of the public arena. What did Paul do in 1 Corinthians? Right, he was addressing the church, and there were some issues in the church. Right, the Corinthians were kind of a messed up people, kind of like we are today. Right, it's about time we get another Paul to come back and point his little bony finger, and say, hey, you have an issue right here. Put your finger on it. But he went after and told the Corinthians, hey, you got a guy in there that took his father's wife. Right, also unlawful, as it is in this country. Right, you got a guy in there that took his father's wife. You got to handle this issue because you've got sin within the camp, as the Old Testament would describe in Israel. You got sin in the camp. So you've got to handle this, and here's how you do it. Go to him, fix the issue, bring a couple more with you, right? Matthew 18 again. Try to fix the issue again. Get all the words. Get your witnesses. If he refuses to repent and turn, then what do? Then you bring it up to the whole body. If he doesn't listen to them, what do? You cast him out as a heathen because obviously that's what he wants to be. Right? I don't hold that in the churches any less than I hold that in politics, right? Because I'm one of the guys, if I see it happening in a church, I'll address it. And I'll do it that way. And if I see it happening in politics, I'll address it the same way. There can be no difference. They are both governing entities. They each have their own governing purpose and limitations. Okay. You can also look, that was kind of more of an egregious error, right? A big transgression that had to be dealt with. But if you go later on, there was one guy that Paul called out, and it never says that he ever addressed. Now, I'm certain he talked to him before, but it never says he actually addressed, but rather called him out for a warning to the rest of the people to have no dealings with this guy. And who was that? Anybody know? This was Alexander the coppersmith, right? He said, Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil, Paul said. That was a very simple statement. And to this day, I don't know of anybody that has come around and said, well, this is what he did to Paul. I don't think anybody knows that. But the people that were reading that must have known who Alexander the coppersmith was. And because of Paul's report to that, they knew to stay away from Alexander the coppersmith, right? It's the same thing we do.
Maybe he sold him a substandard grade of copper.
That could very well be.
Oldest complaint letter that's known was about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to try to guess on that, but it's got to be something along those lines, if not more egregious than that. But it's the same principle in politics or in anything we do in the world. If we see something happening, somebody causing harm to an individual, and you call it out and they refuse to turn, you bring it up, they refuse to turn, you bring it out publicly. Okay? This is where you end up going to impeachments in politics. Then also you have to go around and warn the other people, right? What do we see during campaign things? When people start campaigning, there's always one person campaigning for this and then another person campaigning against that person, right? Already calling them out. They don't even hold office. They're already calling them out for things. That's the point, is to make the public aware, make your neighbors, friends, family, your countrymen aware of what's going on. Saying, hey, in case you missed this, you need to stay away from this guy because of these reasons, right? If they don't believe you, let them go and address the guy. You get 100,000 people going after one guy over one issue. I'm pretty sure he's probably going to listen to you. Just thinking out loud. But normally, I would think that you just have a handful of people that are willing to do that, right? Which is why it's important to contact your representatives when issues come up. Call them, text them, send them emails, go to their offices, knock on their door, wring their necks a little bit, right? Why is this, right? I want to go to Psalms chapter 7 a minute. In verse 10 through 12, if I don't click that button, we'll be good. Verses 10 through 12, this is what it says. It says, my defense is God, or my shield is of God, which saveth the upright in heart. God judgeth the righteous and is angry with the wicked every day. If he turn not, he will whet his sword. He hath bent his bow and made it ready. He hath also prepared for him the instruments of death. He ordained his arrows against his persecutors. Okay? Think about that for a minute. This is the judge of the universe, right? This is what our standard should be. This is what we should hold to, is his law, right? The premise, the common law, the foundation of this country is what we ought to be holding to in every aspect. It is the standard for civil government, and we need to make sure it remains that way. Federally, state, locally, whatever. That is our standard. And it's not that we seek the injury or the death of the person we're calling out, but rather it's just the opposite, right? People say, oh, you just hate that guy because you continuously call him out on things, right? You must just hate him. Well, that's not true. I love that guy enough to be able to point my finger and say, what you're doing is wrong. Look at this in Psalm 7, right? The judge says that his bow is bent and is aimed at you. So I would suggest you turn from this, get it corrected before the judge comes down and makes his righteous judgment over you. Okay? There's a difference between hate and love. Hate will withhold the truth to an individual. Just think about that in salvation process, right? Those people that say, They don't go out and witness to people. That's kind of a thing of the past. But rather, we just try to entertain them and get them into the church so they can hear. Well, you for all practicalities, you hate that person, because we ought to be willing to go in that aspect and warn them of the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience. We ought to warn them of the transgressions that they're committing and be willing to help direct them to that repentant stage, right? Let the Spirit convict them and say, hey, I've been here. This is what I was doing. This is what happened to me. And look at how much this has changed here, right? That's love. It's love in action, according to 1 John 3:18, not in just words, but rather in action. And that is the difference. A lot of people will call it hate because they don't know what love is, whether or not they didn't get it as a child or whether or not they actually don't have the light in them, but they don't understand what love is in that aspect. Another thing that Paul told Timothy, right? What are we to hold? This is kind of branching off that. What are we to hold to when we do such things, right? In 1 Timothy 3:15, now we'll go back a little bit. Let's start in verse 12. Keep the context a little bit. 2 Timothy 3:12, sorry. He said, but evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived, right? We see that happening in the country. But continue thou in the things which thou hast learned and hast been assured of, knowing of whom thou hast learned them, right? Which means if you know the truth, hold to it. Don't fray from it. And that from a child thou hast known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith which is in Jesus Christ, right? As a child could be metaphorically used here to say as a young convert, right? As a child of the faith. Once we know that, hold to it. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, and instruction in righteousness, right? 4 things. Now understand here at the point this is written, what Scripture did they have? They had the Old Testament, not the New Testament, right? We haven't canonized that yet. So the Old Testament specifically is profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, and instruction. Why? The last verse, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. That is the purpose of reproving. That is the purpose of rebuking. And that is the purpose of exhorting an individual when they get it corrected, is that each person may become closer to perfection in Christ, because we are told by him, be ye perfect. We're told by him, be ye holy as I am holy. And we are also told in the New Testament that his commands are not grievous, right? They're not hard, as a lot of people like to say, well, it's just impossible to keep all these. Well, in the flesh it is. But in the Spirit, we're told that he that abideth in the Spirit sinneth not, right? These are simple truths that we just have to get our mentality corrected. Because if we think something doesn't add up, we can rest assured that it's right and we're wrong. We got to adjust our thinking to match. So these are all possible things that we can do. But it requires men and women of the faith to actually be willing to step up and say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. This is why it's wrong. You need to turn from this and get this correct. Right? I don't care if it's individuals. I don't care if it's political figures. It all applies in the same manner. And the reason why we have impeachments is to prove that point. An impeachment is no less than a censure to say, hey, what this guy did was wrong. Which is why the House of Representatives is not in charge of actually holding the judgment on impeachment. Right? That goes to the Senate, the fewer body of the state. They're in charge of the actual judgment. The people just have to be willing to put up the impeachment, and hopefully the individual will correct their stance and correct the issue. That way, it doesn't happen again. But if not, and it's grievous enough, by all means, let the Senate go in, remove the person from office, and prosecute them under the law, because that's the way we hold the wicked accountable, and that's the way we justify the righteous and show mercy to the innocent. Right? We have it just the opposite in the American judicial system, where we think we need to show mercy to those committing the crimes when they're not repentant of them. And those who, how is that worded? Oh, in Jonah, those who observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy, right? So if we start believing, in fact, that that showing mercy to those who are guilty and unrepentant, mind you, that somehow we're actually doing a just work, is the exact opposite of how it is. We forsake mercy and we actually show cruelty to the innocent when we do such things, right? That'd be like somebody going in and murdering your child, right? They go through judgment. They say, "Oh, well, we need to show that person mercy. You know, we'll put them away for 6 months, and then we'll go ahead and let them back out." Well, what does that do to the family of the child that just got murdered? That shows them cruelty. It doesn't show them mercy. It shows them cruelty because this man's now back out and is willing to commit the same acts over and over again. Right?
Well, and I think too, another good biblical example of calling out a public figure for something they're doing wrong is you look at King David. He was, he's portrayed as being righteous. That's kind of what he's known for, right? But then you look through, I think it's First Chronicles, and he is called out for one thing that he did wrong, and that was taking an unauthorized census. And he was called out for it, and he basically was like, "Yep, that was wrong," and he repented for it. But this was well into his tenure as being a known for being, famous for being a righteous and just ruler. And he was called out for what he did wrong.
Yeah, and that wasn't the only time, right? But that was one of those specific times. The other was with Bathsheba, taking Bathsheba, killing Uriah.
Yeah, this whole taking wives thing and taking women thing, I got a little bit of an issue with this right now. Clearly, they don't have enough cowgirls out there because we would have our boots on and we'd be just like setting the tone of the conversation. I'm pretty extra sure.
Yeah, and you look through a lot of the Old Testament, and a lot of it is showing bad examples. This is what this person did wrong. Learn from them.
That was a big issue I had to come to terms with when I was younger. And I think sometimes the message of repentance from Christians is unpalatable because people feel like they're being looked down on rather than in the proper perspective, right? When we talk to people about repentance, it needs to be said, and to your point, Bill, it's a point of love. It's like watching somebody who's committing suicide by inches because they're doing the wrong thing. And God's laws always protect us. It's not just to tell us not to do something we enjoy. It's trying to save us from doing things that will hurt us. And I think that's something that can't be overstated, that the delivery on a lot of this stuff changes all the difference. When you look back at the Bible, and that was a big thing for me, when I was younger, I remember that clearly, is not questioning at anything in the Bible and being respectful. And there was definitely a fear of God there, no two ways about it. But then when I really came to terms with the fact that this entire Bible is all bad examples, the only good example we had was Jesus Christ, and he didn't throw a stone, but you look at, chopping bodies up. I mean, you look at the Old Testament, it is brutal. And I don't think it's necessarily to put people on a pedestal, because there's conflict in every decision that was made, and not say that this was the right thing to do. It was like, there was not one person in any of these situations that did the right thing. They were all sinners. They all did the wrong thing. And even to look at other ways that they could have resolved things instead of making excuses for the bad behavior. I mean, look at Sodom and Gomorrah, for example. People want to point to the things that they find reprehensible to them. But the reality was that Lot threw his virgin daughters out into the street, or was willing to do that. I'm not thinking that this was an honest action whatsoever. To look at these things critically and say, there's fault on every single side here. And if people were doing the right thing, both sides would be called out, instead of being an ego-based problem that created their own problems. You see what I'm saying? Like even the example you gave of the death to all of the Benjamites there. If you go back to the beginning of that conflict, who suffered? It was probably the innocent, and the ones that were sitting in the caves, they were the one that were given a pass for what they did and how they did refuse to diplomatically solve this problem. And the problems that they created fell upon the necks of their own people. I would say right now that they were lousy leaders and they were disgusting human beings. And the fact that they were given a pass at all was only by the grace of God.
A little bit of a modern example of the same kind of a problem that came up the other day in a conversation is looking at what happened with the firebombing of Dresden during World War II. There were an awful lot of people there that were just civilians that suffered terribly for indiscriminate destruction. That, I mean, there's complications there that none of us are going to understand fully because we weren't there. But you start looking at some of the brutality of the attack on that particular town. It raises some real interesting questions.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right with this, because remember, the victors always write the history. So even the history that we have been handed, whether it was in the last 20 years or 50 years or 100 years, the victors are still writing the history. And unless we look at it in a balanced approach and ask some questions, and I think there's a lot of questions that need to be asked about World War I and World War II. The people that were being made into being victims in this, it may not be exactly what we think it is. When you look at the brutality that happened from the Japanese, they were some of the most brutal crimes that were committed, and it needs to be questioned. But it never gets called out.
So who are the main victims of World War II? As us as a nation, who are the main victims of World War II? I would plead that it was actually the American people who became the victims of World War II by getting involved. Because as we got drawn into that and we went over and supposedly decimated the threat, right, with the help of the other nations, what is it that Americans did right after that? Does everybody know of Operation Paperclip?
Of course.
Yep.
Of course, yeah. So we got involved in that conflict. We went over, decimated the issue, right? Which means we got to write the history on it. And then we took the high-grade officers and a high-grade scientists and such and brought them over here. They never got prosecuted for their crimes. We put them up over here and made them American slaves to do the federal government's bidding. And what did we have after World War II? Now we have all this biological warfare. We have all this chemical warfare that we see
Guam
going
Island,
on
everything.
daily, right? So why do you think we got involved in World War II? I would dare say that was the entire premise behind it. And those in power knew that that's what they were going to do.
Those in power have got to create a victim and a boogeyman all the time. And so if you look back at this and realize that it was the Bushes that were funding both sides of World War II, who was responsible for that war? It was the United States of America that was responsible for that war. They set it up. They made money off of it. They created a situation to exterminate anyone that would ask questions or question the narrative right off the bat. They were the first ones that they executed. And then they brought all those people that they were funding back to the United States of America. This was not as innocent as people want to believe it is, nor is it exactly as the narrative has been thrown out there. And we need to question this and go back to not protected classes of people. And that means the United States of America. That means any ethnicity that's out there and say we can't speak evil about these people because they were a victim. Well, there's victims in every conflict. There's no two ways about it. Were they victims? They were. But were some of them also part of it? Again, they were. It's the people that are trading the money around and who will step into that B6 system in every single country across the globe. It's not what they have been telling us it is. We were responsible for World War II, the United States of America. Bush's sat right at the top of that.
And not just in Europe either, because we were also, to a large extent, responsible for provoking Japan into bombing Pearl Harbor and starting that conflict. If you look at that was the thing that's portrayed as being the start of that conflict. No, it goes back quite a ways before that, particularly with some of the restrictions that the U.S. was starting to apply on fuel and resources to Japan.
And complicity. Complicity of Pearl Harbor. Our country was complicit because they turned the other way. The same thing that happened in 9/11 with turning off, not having the jets respond to this, turning off the defense system to let the planes, drones, whatever you think they are, but they enabled this. And there's a global structure behind all of this. And we have to get away from looking at this as countries because they use that as a mask, as a masquerade to do great evil across the planet.
And bring that into modern day context a little bit. Look at Israel and Palestine. Look at the conflict going on over there, right?
And now Syria.
Who set that up?
Syria.
Who set that up? The United States funded Hamas in the 80s. We built Hamas up because Israel needed a threat to Yasser Arafat to get rid of him. And then what did Hamas do? They managed to gain power uncontrolled because we left them alone because they did their bidding, right? They did our bidding over there. We left them alone. They gained control and power. And now all of a sudden they are the threat. Well, who's going to be set up to take them out? Pay attention to it. Because somebody will be set up to take down Hamas, and they will become the next threat. It's never ending. We set them up, we take them down.
Same with the Taliban.
It's political games.
Same thing.
Taliban, ISIS, that was all funded, right? The Hitlers. Yeah, the Hitlers. The Clintons.
McCain were involved in ISIS.
Yeah, and the Clintons were directly funding that as well.
Sure were. And Obama, their little Manchurian candidate, the Kenyan.
Yeah. So yeah, it's all a giant political show, a political game, and the people got to start paying attention to this and not just taking what the media has to offer and say, "Oh yeah, there's something going on, so we gotta stick with one side or the other," right? No, I'm all for it. If you want to support Palestine, go ahead. If you want to support Israel, go ahead. I think it's rather kind of an idiotic move. However, there are innocents being killed on both sides, right? And we have never declared war over there, and we need to stay out of it. Quit funding it, number one. Quit sending the billions of dollars over there because let's put it this way, the American people are paying for the slaughter of the innocent.
Agreed.
Right?
Across the globe.
No less than the funding for Planned Parenthood coming out of the federal government since the 70s. The American people, those listening that pay your federal taxes, right? Those paying taxes are funding the murder of children. How does that grab you?
And the child trafficking. The millions of kids that have disappeared, the child trafficking. It's the United States of America that pays the most amount of money for children. And everybody's looking the other way. No one is dealing with this. They're not dealing with it at the border. They're not dealing with any of this because they're complicit in it.
So those people that say, well, I don't really want to get involved in politics. That's not my thing. Well, then quit funding it so we ain't got to fight it so much. How about that? That's a first
bad
step,
news. You're already in it.
Yeah.
You're in it.
You're
you
living
don't get
it.
to walk away.
You're living it, and you're providing the money for them to do it. Think about it. Just roll that over in your head for a few hours every day. Tell me what becomes of that, because it'll eat you alive when you realize that it's your money being used for this purpose.
Yeah,
So get
every
involved.
single death we see over there in Palestine and in Syria and in Israel, and the ones that are murdered in China by the CCP. Thank you to the piece of crap Henry Kissinger, who is now dead, which the world is a better place because he's not here. And all of these politicians that have been playing this game for years, we're responsible for those deaths, the torture. It's the United States that was behind it.
You got it. You absolutely nailed it right there.
So
I'd
who's
like-
the greatest evil right now? And who deserves the wrath of God? You know what? I'm going to tell you. Hi, Shawn. I can see you backstage. Hang on a second. I'm going to tell you what. When I heard that story about everyone in that party in Germany walking away, it was almost an entire political party. Donna's dream world right now is to see every single person in Congress walk away and see what we have, because of the threat of the rightful president of the United States, President Donald J. Trump, who hopefully will go in there like an absolute bull in a china shop and turn this shit around and hold every single one of them accountable for January 6th, who said nothing. It was an attack on the seated president of the United States, Donald Trump, on January 6th by the evil forces within, and not one of them said a thing. Neither side pitched a fit. I think this could be really epic. And just saying, if we could have our dream world, it would be for every one of them to run like the cowardly rats they are for the shadows, because they know justice is coming.
Well, I'm not going
I'd
to hold
like
my
to-
breath on that one, but it would be nice to see. Absolutely.
It's my dream world. Don't destroy my dreams here, Paul. I mean, this is my dream world, right?
Yep. The people got to put up and push for it too. You can't leave the people out, right? Can't put all this on the shoulders of the president. The people got to be willing to do it.
I'd like to bring us back to a couple of biblical examples.
Oh, I love
In
it. Karen.
In Exodus, we have Moses coming down the mountain, finding everybody partying. They have melted the gold, and Aaron says, well, the calf just came out. No, Aaron dropped the ball. He went along with what the people said to do, when he should have been the last man standing, so to speak. The Levites didn't stop it. None of the people stood up and put a stop to it. They collectively collected that gold and made a image that was not God and started to worship it. What did they have to do? They had to punish one another. The Levites had to go around the camp, killing their brother, their neighbor, their friends. They had a collective punishment because nobody stood up to do the right thing. In another story in Numbers 13, we have what usually people call spies. We have 12 of them, each representing a tribe, going into a land and looking over and saying, coming back to the people, oh my goodness, 10 of them reported, these people are so big, we are like grasshoppers to them. They're going to chew us up and spit us out. There's no way we can defeat them. God wants us to go into this land, but it's not possible. And 2 of the men, Caleb and Joseph, said, oh, actually, I have the scripture right in front of me. What does he say?
Is it Joshua?
Caleb, yeah. Did I say
Joshua.
Joseph? I do that sometimes.
Right.
Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for undoubtedly we shall overcome it. And what happens? Well, God ends up rewarding Caleb and Joseph. They are the only 2 of all the people who came out of Egypt who made it across the river into the promised land 40 years after they left. because they had faith. And they stood up against all the other ones and told the people, we can do this because God is with us. It doesn't matter if they're all like Goliath. God is going to take care of us. And that's the faith that we're required to have. That's the faith that says we have to stand up against what is wrong, police one another, and prove that faith in God is stronger than whatever man can bring against us. I yield.
Yeah. Two out of millions. Two survived.
Well, I guess
Because
that's why we're here,
I
guys.
believe the 10.
We've got like 4 or 5 or 10 of us here now that are still saying the unpopular things and quite honestly refusing to stop. So that's the way it is. Well, fast 30 seconds. Ralph, Bill, and Karen. 30 seconds. And then I'm going to go to Shawn Starry.
The point of calling politicians out, no matter what their party affiliation is, no matter what they say, calling them out for their actions that's an important aspect of what we should be doing.
Yeah, and we're told by, I believe it was Samuel Adams, or maybe James Madison, I forget which. But we're told that our representative government should be in miniature an exact representation of the people at large, right? Which is, it doesn't matter what you think of them right now, they currently are. Because the thieves, thugs, murderers, and idolaters that we have sitting in Congress, they represent the thieves, thugs, murderers, and idolaters that are allowed to be and remain as Americans unprosecuted, okay? So they will always be an exact representation of us. So it's time that the people get up, the people correct themselves, get renewed by God, get the heart softened a little bit, get in the game, and actually do something about it.
Agreed. It is a representation of us, because I don't know about you, but how many people do you know who have actual integrity and willing to stand unwavering under all conditions? I'm not saying that you're not going to be a little mad about them once in a while, or that it's always going to be, flowers and whatever. It's going to be it's a tough road to walk when you make that kind of a commitment. It's not for the weak of heart or mind, but it is worthwhile, and that's what we're called to do in our quest to be more like God Almighty. That's the quest right there, is to learn to walk in his steps and be like him. He gave up everything in order for us to have that relationship with him, because he loves us and wants to be with us. He gave us his only begotten son to make that way. And we need to honor that and know that that's not out of condemnation. It's out of absolute love for us that he did that. He didn't want to see us departed from him forever, because he loves us. And that's something we can focus on today. You're all loved. So we're going to go to a quick break here, and then I'll be on with Shawn Starry, the producer of Panhandle. We're going to be talking about what happened down there in Texas. And I really think that there's some validity to these directed energy weapons. I mean, I think we've seen enough to know that we need to question everything. We'll be right back. Good morning and welcome to the second hour of Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg, and it is the 11th day of December 2024, and welcome to our show. We're going to move right into Shawn Starry, the producer, director, and creator of Panhandle, the documentary. Morning, Shawn. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing great.
Awesome. I'm glad you were able to get on this morning. And yesterday we had a few problems with the broadcast. And so we were all like holding our breath a little bit, hoping that we weren't running into the same attack that we had yesterday. So I'm glad you're on. So what do you want to talk about today?
So today I want to talk about the Panhandle documentary that I produced. This documentary takes on, on February 28th of this year. There was a fire outbreak in the Panhandle of Texas. And at the time, some good friends of mine, Ryan Zink and Joshua James, who I have met through a third party. And I actually did an interview with them for my podcast show about Ryan Zink being a J6 prisoner. And we kind of stayed connected from January of this year all the way up to this point. But they reached out to me and they said, hey, we've got this fire down here and it's really out of control. And something just doesn't add up. And so I called out to my business partner at the time, who was a rancher. And we were discussing about going down there to investigate the fire itself. Now, the big thing for me is that I grew up on a farm when I was a kid. So I know how the ranching and farm life, how it is, and how the mentality and the struggles that people go through. And so I booked the plane ticket, and I was down there on March 3rd. I arrived down in Midland, Texas, where I met up with Joshua James and Melissa Frizzell. And from there, we went down to Lubbock, Texas, where Ryan is living. And then from there, we started to collect a lot of the donations. I think all together in the 3 days, we raised $50,000. We went to a nearby high school. There was an ag department where students came out and volunteered to help us kind of rearrange a lot of the donations. We went to Fritch, Texas. We did drop off there. And then we ended up making our way back to Lubbock, Texas that night. Over the next couple of days, just reaching out and trying to get somebody to talk to interview, which was pretty difficult because at the time the fire was still going on. And so from there, I went to, let's see here. I've got my notes wrote down. So
you went down there to do donations and to help the people that were down there. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. So it was to go down there to help out. But at the same time, it was to go down there to document everything that was going on. I brought my camera with me, my video camera, tripods, all that stuff. And it was interesting because, I mean, it's what you would typically see in some type of natural disaster scenario. We went to a local Baptist church there, and I believe it was in Fritch, Texas. And we were, talking to people down there. We're trying to get an idea, of how the fire started. That's my first concern. My second concern is how the fire spread so quickly. I believe on day 4, this had reached about almost 1 million acres. So this was really concerning because everybody that, well, folks down in Texas know this, but usually the fires, they have local fire departments, volunteer fire departments in those areas, and they go out, and what they'll do is they'll figure out a way to do a back burn and stop the fire from spreading. And usually, you get a small containment area, maybe, 500 acres or something like this, or, maybe less. But now this has gotten to a point where it's 1 million acres have been destroyed, and the fire was still going on. And the pattern of the fire, that's what really was interesting, because when I had gotten the earlier pictures from the satellite photo images to somebody who had actually honestly reached out to me and sent me an actual picture from United Airlines flight that they were on. It shows that the fire in the early hours was in like 3 straight lines, right? And so for me, that was a red flag, because nothing in nature moves in a straight line. And this is something you can, scientists and firefighters and, those people that caliber of that education will tell you that in nature, nothing moves in a straight line. So then I want to say about day 6 or 7, PG&E Electric Company came out and said, they had an official photo that they had published in the news showing that they're claiming their telephone line started the fire. So many red flags went off when I saw that photo, because number one, it had orange bands on the telephone line. Number two, why wasn't the telephone line burned up itself? There was no black suits on it.
What's the significance of the orange bands?
So the orange bands, so the loggers, people who cut trees down, or utility phone companies, what they do is when they get a telephone pole that is really kind of petrified, it's old, it needs to come down. What they'll do is they'll mark them with like orange bands or orange spray paint. And what they do is they come out with the replacement poles, and they'll take out the old pole by separating lines off first carefully. They'll take the old pole off, and then we'll reinstall a new pole into the ground, and then they'll hook up the lines to it. Now, what was interesting about it is that the location of where that pole was laying, that was the first thing that my first lead on this. So I drove out to the exact location to where this pole allegedly by PG&E said was laying that started the fire. And when I got out there, I realized that this was actually a deception. The pole does not originate there. In fact, there are no telephone poles along the side of the highway. If you go in about 50 to 60 yards in, there's only 3 telephone lines, and then it turns to the east, and this is where you get to one of those big transformers. Now, all of those have been destroyed, but the land itself, if you look at the photo, it goes in about I want to say up to the point where the pole is touching the ground. Just ahead of that, you'll see that the land has been burnt, right? But you'll see a split or a division within the burn patterns. The pole itself and the grass underneath the pole was completely unaffected. So, so I know that the telephone pole was a plant. It was not what started the fire to begin with. Second of all, when you go out there and look at it, there's no telephone poles running north of there. It's just all open country land. So why was that telephone pole there at that location to begin with? So that was my big question. And that led me to believe that this was some kind of cover-up. So I had to start digging a little bit deeper, trying to figure out what's going on. So I went to Warger, Texas, and I started asking around, started talking to some people. They showed me some videos of the earlier fires that were when they were first started. And while I was there, I had someone who sent me an actual video. And this particular video was just really interesting, but this is kind of what started the whole thing, I guess, pretty much. Going down this rabbit hole. But this was somebody who was within the United States Air Force. had sent me this particular video, and it actually shows it was an F-35 Gen 2 fighter equipped with a high-power weapon, showing that this airplane was setting the Panhandle of Texas on fire.
Do you have any videos of that we could show?
I do.
Could you put it in the private chat, and I'll just pull it up from there. If you just copy a link in there, I'll go to that and we'll show everybody what you're talking about, because this is very disturbing and probably something we should put out there for people to see.
Most definitely.
This is what we do. We get on here and we show things. I wanted to show while you're doing that. This is kind of funny. 3,800-year-old tablet contains the world's first customer service complaint. Kind of off on the side, but I thought that was pretty funny. Well, you look at all the disasters that are around, including some of the issues in California where they want to put high-speed rail. There seems to be an awful lot of synergy or whatever with PG&E and these smart meters. A lot of concerns that I have for that. What are they actually doing when these disasters hit? Who's going after the land? Is there a land grab going on? Is there another reason why this happened? Never believe it for what they say in face value anymore, because they can create all kinds of disasters, and they're either after something or they're going to create a problem and then provide the answer for that. CMO.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing that we found out in our investigation is we found out that Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and Raytheon have been working in tandem in contracts with the United States government and with China as well, developing the same type of weapons with taxpayer-funded money and Chinese-funded money. So they have both been getting the exact same type of equipment. We're talking high-power weapons, we're talking drones, and one of the things that we figured out in this investigation was this. So we know that right after the fire, within a week, there were what I call predatory buyers. They come in. I'll give you a good example. So there's a family in Wheeler, Texas.
Did you get the? I'm going to stop you a second. Did you get the text in the private chat there so I can pull that up while you're talking?
Yeah, I'm actually looking it up here real quick.
Okay, good. Because that way, while you're talking, I can go ahead and I'm sorry to interrupt you on that, but I think people would like to see this. It was an F-35.
Yeah, it's an F-35 Gen 2, Generation 2 fighter jet.
See if we can bring this up, guys. I think this could be really important. Be really surprising if they went ahead and they kind of did a little hiding on this for us. Lots of F-35 planes out here, or jets out here for sure. We can always come back to this too.
Yeah, I'm looking up on my TikTok channel here. I've got kind of a snippet of it.
Okay.
I don't know if I can put it in your present or not, but
If you just put it in the private chat, go to the button that says private chat and paste it in there, and then I'll look it up from there.
okay.
Real news for real people by real people at the kitchen table, people. This is how it goes.
Yeah. I'll send you this first one, but this one is actually what they call the TR-3B Astra. It's an anti-gravitational device or anti-gravitational craft that the U.S. government is in current possession of, and they have used this in Afghanistan and Iraq as well.
They've got a lot of equipment that they don't admit to, like the SR-72, that sort of thing. They'll admit to the 71, but nobody really admits to the 72. So you got to be a little bit of a plane or an aircraft obsessed individual to know about this sort of stuff.
Right, and that's kind of my, I guess it's a hobby of mine for years. That I've always been really interested in aircrafts and
me too.
So,
what's your favorite aircraft?
Mine is an F-14 Tomcat.
You're my guy there. That is my absolute favorite aircraft of all times, hands down. That in fact, I was watching an engineering show on it last night, looking at how they did the titanium wing box and how they adjusted the airflow. It's really, that is an amazing feat of engineering, and the best pilots, and you all know who you are, that are out there that flew the F-14. I think it's the best pilots in the history of the United States, because they didn't have as much automation. So you actually had to be able to fly those things and make judgments, not having it all computerized.
Yeah.
And to those who are listening, I'm still waiting for my signed autograph picture, of said person next to an F-14.
Yeah, I've always, I've always had this sort of inane interest in, especially mechanical application, and that has just been something.
Okay, are you going to add it to the stage? Because you can. Oh, we added another one there. Let's see.
Yeah,
who's there?
I'm going to add this on from.
You know what? Let's just skip it for right now, because it's pretty easy to just move that over and put it into the private chat. But we'll come back to that later. So let's go ahead and talk about the predatory buyers. Okay.
That's fine. So what we do know is that there was it's a 3-stage process of what they were doing. First stage, what they had to do was they needed to dry out the land. And I know a lot of people don't, there've been a lot of talk about this, on the social media stuff, but what I have found through a lot of my research and through the articles that I had found prior to the fire, they had been talking, or they had published in November, that they were going to do some chemtrail spraying in Arizona and Texas. And so the chemtrails that are made out of silver nanoparticles. And what they did was, when they sprayed that into the air, once it reached the land, what it did was it dried out the grass very, very quickly. And so when the day came that they decided to set the fire, which we do know this, we know they set the fire through the F-35 Gen 2. We also know that they use what they call Dragon Ball eggs. And it's a ping pong sized ball that they fill with potassium pomegranate. And then they, when they shoot it out, whether it's by hand or whether it's by drone, it mixes with glycol. As soon as it hits them on impact, it mixes the two chemicals and instantly starts to fire. Well, now you got one of those little balls can create a fire about 20 feet in radius.
What is that called? What are they? You said Dragon Balls?
Dragon Ball eggs.
Okay.
And usually the fire departments will reach out to a company, and I can't think of the name of the company right off my hand, but these drones, they can go for anywhere I want to say between 15,000 on up to about $40,000-$50,000. But these particular drones I use in particular to fly the drones in areas that they cannot get into by vehicle or by foot, and to be able to start a backburn, which would choke out any of the material, and that would stop the fire, the major fire when it comes through. Yeah, so that's what it is. And these ping pong ball size that are filled with potassium pomegranate, they give off a purple hue, a purple color when they're burning. And and in the documentary, you'll see that there's a video of an actual fire, which is on the southeast side of the Panhandle area where the fire is. Right now, this particular time when they set the fire was moving from northwest to southeast direction. So we know that wasn't used as a way to do a back burning, but it was actually to continue the fire and the fire's progression. And what's interesting is that the location that I was able to find us, just not too far from there, I want to say within a mile down the road, there's a local fire department, a volunteer fire department down there. And when I looked into that particular fire department, one of the things I found was that there had been several firefighters who have been arrested for arson in the previous past. So I see that we found the connection with potentially that one or not more than one of their firefighters was being paid to commit arson in that particular general area. And we know this because when I sat down and did the docuseries on this with a retired firefighter, and I said, okay, so we know that there is an actual fire color code chart. And so we pull the color code chart up, and we can actually see what type of chemicals were used, or if any chemicals were, if it's a natural elements like grass or trees or things of that nature. And usually they burn kind of an orange or a reddish orange color, but you won't see them burning colors like green or any type of fluorescent colors or purple. Those are usually something that's introduced into it that causing the fire. And so we know that from this purple fire and how quickly it spread, and we can see how it was reignited every time. So so we know that they're using the Dragon Ball eggs. We know that the F-35 Gen 2 aircraft was using a high power weapon system. We do know well, I will tell you this much. So one of the days that I was down there, I think this was on March 8th or 9th, in the wee hours, Christy and I had gone to Wheeler, Texas, and because that was a point of interest for part of our investigation. And while she was asleep that night in the hotel, I decided to go out and see if there's any young people kind of hanging around. So I went to a local gas station just down the road. And while I was down there talking to this couple, we started hearing some strange buzzing sound in the air. And my first thought was maybe there's a transformer about to blow, because, they make that kind of a humming sound. And somebody said, no, there's something up in the air. So we kind of moved towards the end of the gas station. I pulled out my phone and I recorded a TR-3B Astra anti-gravitational craft using a high-power weapon to set the south side field on fire just south of Wheeler. So after that, we called the fire department, and they came out. They were able to put the fire out relatively quickly. And what was interesting is the fact that I got to witness something like this, how easy it is for them just to be able to be able to fly these crafts and just set these fields on fire like it's nothing, and the thing that gets me the most is how they've been using these devices to make things look like it's a climate change issue. Like, oh, it's Mother Nature, doing this, so we need to raise more taxes for this, right? Well, they get these what I call predatory buyers. They come in right after the fire. Like, good example, like the Wheeler family just outside of Canadian Texas. They're in their 80s, and they have been talking for months about selling their house. And the location of where they live is right up on top of this big hill. And they've lost everything there. Everything was pretty much burned up. But there was a lot of inconsistencies with the burn patterns. And so when I talked to the old couple, or just started talking to them, they said, yeah, they just sold the land for 3 times its actual property value to another guy. And I just happened to have a picture on my phone, and I held it up to him. I said, is this the guy? And they said, yeah, that's the guy. In fact, he's just slaving right now. And so I was able to get a somewhat of a partial picture of his license plate in the car. So I did some tracking down on that, and I was able to find out that he's from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And what's even more interesting is that he's from Dubai. I don't know how do you pronounce it, but it's
he's from Dubai.
Yeah, he's from Dubai. So Dubai initially equipped him with money, with an LLC, a business, to represent them. And he shows up in Fort Lauderdale 2 years before, and he goes around and he does predatory buying. So what was interesting is that he had a file about this thick on the entire property, along with the contract in it. And so they knew everything about these locations. And of course, as I started to go from that location to another location, I found that these people had sold out their properties to this gentleman as well. And then
foreign money buying American land is not okay.
It's not. And they're using the corporation, or the LLC or corporation status with foreign money to turn around and buy up these lands. And what got even more interesting in all of this is I ended up making a connection with another lady on TikTok, who's actually doesn't live too far from where I live. And she has been talking about the other piece of the story. And so when I started to hear some of the things that she was saying, I thought, okay, there has to be a connection here. And so I started doing, I started looking up on the United States Geological Survey and getting all of the reports of the mineral samples throughout the United States. And so I would focus just on the specific locations of where I was, like with the Wheeler family in Canadian Texas. There's 2 other locations just outside of Canadian Texas as well. And those were prime locations for some of the largest deposits of lithium. Now, what was interesting about it is that took me down another rabbit hole, understanding about lithium and how to mine it and what the pros and cons of that are. And what I found is that lithium is actually it's just as dangerous as uranium. We also know that in the Texas Panhandle, there's uranium deposits as well. There's lithium deposits, there's cobalt, all the basic ingredients you would really need to make a battery for, say, a Tesla car. But you would have to use fresh water, which is about 100,000 gallons, just to produce 2 pounds of lithium.
This
Um,
whole green energy nonsense is nothing more than money laundering into their pockets over a lie. Only thing green about it is they're making money and making lots of it over a lie. It is a lie.
yeah, exactly. And they're using advanced weapons technology systems that's coming out of DARPA, and DARPA's feeding that to Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, and then they take the bits and pieces of that and they sample them, put them together, they manufacture them, and then they sell them. Now, what's interesting is in the past, if I went to Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, to one of their distributions, and I said, hey, I want to buy one of your, let's say, your Stalker drones, right? And I want it equipped with a high power weapon. This is the kind of high power weapon that I want. How much would this cost me? And typically they would say, do you work with the government? You know, they've got some questions, but they said, well, if you've got, you know, $160,000, if you want to purchase this, we can make this happen for you today, and we can have this shipped out by the end of the week to your location. So that tells me right there that just about anybody can get their hands on this advanced weapons technology system, and they're parceling it out. So if, say, somebody like, you know, from Dubai who comes over here who is, you know, buying up lands, snatching up lands, or even China's doing the same thing too, which we were able to find there was actually 2 individuals that are doing predatory buying as well. And what we found out was right now lithium is the new gold rush, and they're willing to rob, lie, and steal, and to kill,
burn up the Panhandle of Texas to get to have a land grab.
Exactly. And what they don't realize is that the Panhandle of Texas. Okay, so kind of put this in perspective. So Texas produces 80% of the beef in the United States. The Panhandle produces 6% of that 80%, which is quite a bit of meat to begin with, quite a bit of cattle. And while I was down there, Joshua James and I had a good friend who lives in Oklahoma, who owns a gun store, and he had flown in some ammo. I want to say about 15,000 rounds of ammo. And so I had to go down to Lubbock Airport to pick that up. And while I was giving them out to ranchers, I was also giving them out to the veterinarians out there. And in one particular place I went to, they were rounding up all the cows that had been severely injured that they could not save. I mean, they're still alive, but very badly burnt. And they would load them up and trailers, and they would bring them to one location. And the veterinarian over there at the time was using ammunition to put these cattle down. There's nothing about the cattle that they can even save. They can't even save the meat. They can't save nothing because it's been so badly burnt, and everything about the cow is damaged. So,
well, infection sets in and that sort of thing. I mean, when there's damage to an animal, you're going to have disease that's going to start in unless it's treated right away.
Exactly, and there's not enough antibiotics. There's not enough medications to treat them on the volume and the scale they had, because they were putting down about 10,000 heads of cattle per day. And this went on for 12 days. So to give you an idea of the scope of how much cattle was lost, and they were literally running out of ammunition. And so when I showed up and I, just handed them a big box of ammunition, they were forever grateful for that. Now I had an opportunity. I could have filmed the whole entire thing, and but I just felt like it just was not. It wasn't the right thing to do at the time.
The problem is these globalists are going after our food supplies. This has been going on since the Transcontinental Railroad went across, where they exterminated, millions of the American bison we had food everywhere. Uh-huh. They want to control the food supply. They want to control the population. They want to control, just like the bird flu. How come they're testing cow's milk for bird's flu? This is the dumbest thing that I've heard of, but you know why they're going to do it, so that they can just go in and they can kill a whole bunch of our poultry and destroy the food supply. It always goes hand in hand.
Yeah, and the thing that people don't realize is, do people really realize when was the first time they started putting out all these FDA recalls online? This was back in 2006. This is when they started broadcasting it, and then it became a norm with making sure that it gets onto the Weather Channel or any kind of weather app, or Google notifications anytime there's any kind of a recall. And one of the things that I found out when I worked as a military contractor is that the way the government does this is, so the federal government uses the FDA to go after a company and tell them that they've got some kind of bad batch of food. And what they do is they send in private contractors with semi trucks to basically load up their entire warehouse of food for the next year. Okay, keep in mind, this is not the shit that's on the your grocery store shelves, right? This is the next year's batch. There's no testings done. Okay, so how do they know? They don't, but they come in with waving a piece of paper saying, we're going to confiscate your food. Then they take the food and they take it down into the deep underground military bases. The only reason why I know this is because I worked in one of those for 2 years. And I know exactly how they stock the entire underground military dumps is by using the FDA to take food from these major corporations.
What else did you see down there as a contractor? I'm kind of curious. What is the system like underground? How big is it? What did you see?
So the one that I worked in is called Site 3. It's just located outside of Chicago. The dome itself, the underground base itself, is bigger. It's about 2 times bigger than the city of Chicago.
You gotta be kidding me.
No, it extends underneath the city of Chicago a little ways. It goes down about 2,200 feet. They're on the 4th level. They actually do have underground railroads. This is called a maglev train system. It's magnetic levitation.
And you've seen this?
Yes, I've seen it firsthand.
Well, I'd like to know what else is going on down there. You know, I think that people need to start talking about this. What other stuff did you see down there under Chicago?
So they have malls down there. They have their own. They have their own hospital. They have their own pharmacy store down there. They've got schools down there. I mean, you talk about anything and everything that you have on the surface, to have it below the ground, but the quality of it is about 10 times better than what it is on the surface.
What kind of people are living down there?
So a lot of them are government personnel, private contractors. We're talking people, that have connections to DARPA. We have, people that work in the scientific communities. We have, folks like myself who do military contracting. We also have we have Army personnel down there as well. And there's just a wide variety of people. But when I was there was about 1,500 people that were currently actively working in that location. But you can only work in that place for a 2-year cycle.
Why?
For security reasons. It's and the big part of it is that whatever all the other stuff that they're doing down there as well. So 2 years on to 2 years off, and then you reapply. And if you pass the background checks, you pass, I guess, their test, then you can come back in and work the next 2 years. But for me, it wasn't so much of an issue because I've always been kind of a, keep your head down and work hard type of guy. And just kind of mind my own business. I said, okay, if the government, if the government's this is taxpayer money that's funding this, and we shouldn't, of course we have to sign an NDA at the time, but my NDA is expired, so I'm not really worried about talking about it. So
what else did you see down there? How many floors does this go down? If you could say how many floors there are, how many floors?
So there's roughly about 22 floors altogether. The bottom of the location or the domes, that's where they do research and development. This is where you're going to get into a lot of your Dr. Frankenstein stuff.
You want to describe that a little bit? I mean, is this where all those kids are going that they're taking from the surface?
I don't know about that, but I do know that when we're talking about things biblically, and I at the time, I was born again believer, but my faith wasn't really solid at the time. One of the first things they tell you is this: if you are a born again believer, a true born again believer, you're going to have to wear a certain protection suits. We have to wear certain suits anyway when you go down to that area. But there are some things you cannot say while you're down there. First of all, you cannot say God's name. You can't say, well, if you want to pronounce God's real name, just yawn in the morning and just yawn before you go to sleep. And when you're yawning, you're actually saying God's name. That's the right, I guess, the correct pronunciation of his name. I am that I am. So.
But you can't say God's name down in the dumps.
You can't say it down in the dumps.
What happens if you do?
Well, let's just say that there's some people down in the dumps. They're not people, but they're not figments of people's imagination when it comes to scriptures from the Book of Enoch.
What do they look like? I'm really curious about this.
They're about 15 to 20 feet tall. They have a light gray skin, like real thick leather. Some of them are pretty hairy, and some are very intelligent. Some are more primal in nature. But the more intelligent ones actually work with the scientists down there. And they have this very intimate knowledge about technology and about a lot of like DNA, about science, about biology, crossing species, things like this.
And you've seen this?
Yeah.
Well, you're the first person I've talked to personally that's actually will admit to have seen this. Everybody else ducks the question. So I'm very interested in what you have to say here, because I think that there's such a great evil that's going on here that we can't even get our arms around it.
No, and that's one of the big things is after I left, I didn't want to go back. After I did 2 years, that was enough for me. I've had my fill.
Were you afraid when you were down there?
I wasn't afraid. I was more curious. I mean, as a security officer down there, we have pretty much free reign to go anywhere within the facility, because we have to respond to, anything. They have their own fire department, but they have a system that's put into place. We have sniffers all over the place. We got cameras all over the place. So that, if there's something off, or maybe there's a staff that's stealing something, or, maybe smoking, or maybe there's some biological contaminant that got loose, the early detection system would let us know that we have to go to that location, and we might have to close off that from the rest of the base. And then we have to go through what they call the purge, where they have to get rid of the virus. They have to burn it out. They have to go in and sanitize it, or maybe just it's a personal, maybe we have to go deal with an employee or something, and then we have to get enough, personnel down there just to be able to go kind of deal with this and stuff. So, but we had one incident where there was a bunch of kids from the city of Chicago that broke through the street, and they had found an opening into the underground dumps, and they got down in there. They were walking around videotaping like the mall areas and some other areas, and the further they got down into it, we knew where they were at all times. So we went down there and we met with them, and we confiscated some of their video, deleted it, and then we'd actually take them back up to the main entrance, where they would be met with a local sheriff's department, and then the sheriff's department would take them and take them out and trespass them. So.
Wow. So what are these outfits? If you're a believer, you said that you have to wear a special outfit. What is that like?
So it's just the same type of outfit that you would have to wear, like a Seaburn outfit, chemical, nuclear, radiological suits. It's got its own airway tank built inside. So you have to wear those when you go down at that level, and you have to go through a two-stage process to make sure that you don't have any contaminants you bring it in, and then you have to go through that as well to make sure you're not carrying anything out with you when you go back out. So we just have to do your routine walkthroughs, just do a security check, just make sure nothing is wrong, nothing's out of place, or that there isn't somebody that's not supposed to be there. Just making sure everything's safe, and then you just kind of walk back out. But we were told that we cannot interact, or we're not supposed to interact with these beings. And but I don't know. For me, it was kind of curiosity, I guess.
Did you ever talk to one?
I did.
Do they have names? I mean, are they just like Yeah,
it was kind of like, hey, what's going on? What's up?
Do they talk?
They do. It's kind of a very low, gruffy voice. Sounds like another old man, but very, very intelligent. At first, he didn't have a lot of time for small talk, but after making rounds down there quite often, just popping, push on the intercom button and say, hey, is everything safe? And he turned around, gave me thumbs up, said, okay. And then later on, we started to kind of build some sort of relationship. And oddly enough, he just sort of knew that I was a believer. And
was they good or bad to them?
Let's just say that they're not good. They're not. Man, I can't believe I'm saying this. But he's an Nephilim, is what he is. He's an Nephilim. And there's a lot that he explained to me. A lot of my understanding of the Bible. For example, I've always been a big King James guy, or even some of the older Bibles, but not like really, really old stuff. But and he was, we had a conversation, and he was asking me a question, and he said, do you know when the Bible was first written? And I was like, I don't know, 15 something. And he goes, no, he goes, much earlier than that. He said, you need to think about when, the big guy showed up. And I said, oh, you mean him? He goes, yeah. He says the Ethiopian people were the first ones to ever write a Bible. They collected all of the writings from all the apostles. But the most important thing he said is that there were 86 books altogether, not 66. He said the reason why they had 66 is because they don't want you to make the connection with everything that Enoch said to what Enoch has a big connection to Revelations, and has a big connection to Jesus. It has big connections to the line of Cain and Abel. or excuse me, the line of Seth, right? So I didn't really know anything about it, so I thought, okay, I'm gonna look it up at least anyway, do a little discernment of my own, and started doing some reading and studying about it, and I started to understand that this guy was not a normal guy. He wasn't just some normal, you know, Tim
15
Waldo.
foot gray guy, right?
Right. And I just thought, okay, this is this guy is not who he says he is or what he appears to be. And then of course when I got into my next conversation with him I asked him, I said, are you one of those Nephilims? And he said, yeah, I am. And I said, is that something you're proud of? He goes, yes. He said, you should always be proud of your heritage. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be really careful about any questions I have. We have to be very careful about what we do ask or how will we interact with them. And there was so much.
Was he amused by you?
He was. I think he was more curious about me, because I wasn't like the typical officer that comes down through there. They always come down there kind of scared or they just don't want to be there.
Why weren't you scared and other people are scared?
I've been through enough darkness in my life that when you go down into these locations, like, a lot of people are afraid of ghosts, or hauntings and things like this. And to me, it doesn't bother me because I've just, I don't know. I just always had that ability to be able to walk through and go, okay, well, here's the reason why the store is banging shut. It's because this window is open. It's creating a vacuum, or, try to figure that, I could rationalize things from a scientific standpoint. But I think a lot of it is my faith. My faith is kind of, I've been through enough baptism by fire in life where my faith has solidified me. I'm not afraid of death. I'm not afraid. I am afraid of loss. I'm afraid of the basic things that most people are. But as far as like being on the job, doing the job, it's just that mentality that I have. It's like, I'm there to do a job. I want to do the best job possible. I want to set a good example for everybody else that I work with. And I want to keep that morale as high as possible so that when I leave, I'm going to leave something positive behind for the next security officers that are going to have to work in that place. And I want them to know that, being on the 22nd level, it's not scary like they think it is. It's just, it's kind of like it's more like finding a gold nugget at the bottom of a barrel, basically. You got to go through that little bit of darkness to find it. But
who's the big guy that he was referring to?
This Nephilim.
Yeah.
I can't really say I'm not going to say his name, but
the bad guy.
Yeah.
Satan himself. I'll say his name. He's a little bitch, is what he is. And it's like, I'm sorry, but that's what it is. He's that's kind of how I feel about this.
And I've never connected, revelations, or I've never connected, like, for example, like the Book of Enoch. I didn't even know it even existed. I just knew that Jesus and the apostles had spoke about his name once, but I didn't really give it any thought, And then when I started making that connection, it was like, okay, wow, they're here. Okay.
Did they ever come out underground?
So typically, no, they don't. But some of the other ones, from what I understand,
Say that
about
again.
national parks.
The feed just broke up a little bit, so say
or-
that again, please. Oh, look at this. Somebody
as
wants
far
you
as
to
I
talk.
know, typically no, they don't. They don't want to out. Are we still there?
Yeah, we're here. We're here back in. You said no, they don't come out of underground. And then what else did you say?
I said the big reasons why is especially it's a security issue. But I think that they're using them for nefarious, sinister plans. That's the deep state. I think a lot of like what we see with the COVID-19, a lot of the vaccines. I have highly suspicious that they're the origination of those are actually coming out of those dumps where the R&D developments are. I don't think they're just come out of China. I think China mass produces them, but that's not what they're the origin of where they're coming out of.
Do you think they're all connected?
Yeah.
Well, I'm fundamentally interested in this. Anything else you can tell me, I would be very interested to hear.
As far as that, that's about all I got for that part. I don't really have much else. Most of the time, you're just either walking around, driving around the dumps, just checking things out. I do know they have a presidential suite down there, so at any given time, if a president is under threat, whether it's like a nuclear war or something, those are the locations. There's 2,200 deep underground military installations across the United States. So they actually have kind of a house under the ground. That's for the president and his family. They have his own private movie theater. He's got his own private kitchen. He's got staff down there to serve, wait on him hand and foot. Let's see what else. I think that's about it for that.
Really interesting. And then you can kind of connect them to the activities that were happening with torching Texas, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so one of the big things is that I knew about the TR-3B Astra anti-gravitational crafts because I've seen them up close.
Say the number of that.
It's TR-3B.
Okay, TR-3V. And you said it was Astra?
Astra. ASTRA.
Huh. All right, now you got my curiosity up.
Okay.
A black triangle?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've a lot of the information on that particular project is available. When I believe Donald Trump, when he declassified a lot of CIA files back in 2019, that was one of the things that came up. I was able to get the patent for it, the actual mechanical diagram of it, and just a few other things, just from a mechanical perspective.
This is really funny because, not funny, haha, but funny, strange, because this morning I was looking stuff up on the internet and there was so much information out there on UAPs.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked. I'm like, okay, why is today the day? And now I know why. This is interesting. says it doesn't officially exist, but then it goes on to say it uses highly pressurized mercury accelerated by nuclear energy to produce a plasma that creates a field of anti-gravity around the ship. I actually looked into that mercury propulsion a while back, which I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, so it actually uses that's kind of a misdirection of truth as to what is being used to power it, but it's actually called unibonium. It's a black sphere, is about this big. 3 ingredients. One of the main ingredients is uranium, but they have to use a particle accelerator in order to make one of those. And what's interesting about it is that it just takes the least amount of electrical or energy manipulation. So if you take like this pen and you put the pen up underneath it, and then you try to lever and pick it up, and just the least amount of effort, that ball starts to float into the air. And when it moves at it, depends on how fast you're doing it, how fast the ball is moving. But they could use manipulation with magnetic, I don't know what they call it. It's kind of like a spear inside of there. But the ball sits in the center, and it's got a whole bunch of different arms on it. And so when they move it from one side or to another side, as the ball moves, it moves the entire craft. And that's the reason why it can move as fast as it does. But it creates a magnetic bubble around the entire ship. So that's why the pilots inside of it don't feel the G-force that our normal pilots do in airplanes, like the F-14 Tomcats.
That's really interesting. Very, very interesting. So where would you like to go from here?
Well, so we can talk a little bit more about the Panhandle.
Sure.
So one of the things that I wanted to address is that everything that's happened in Lahaina, everything's happening in California, everything's happening in Montana, New Mexico, Texas, Chile, even in Canada. All these fires that are happening, I want people to understand is that the main reason why these are happening is one of the first steps they do is whoever's in charge of as the governance there, they have rolled back their funding for their fire department, their forestry management programs that go in, and they do a lot of like underbrush clearing out, cutting down old dead trees. They mark them off with the yellow tapes and stuff. Yeah. They've rolled back a lot of those programs. A lot of logging companies have been going out of business because of that. And so they've got a lot of this dead, petrified bushes and trees and things like this, all in those areas. And then on top of it, they spray with the chemtrail sprays to dry up as much as they possibly can, as quickly as possible. And then all it takes is just, somebody to come in, get paid to do an arson. And these fires just continue to perpetuate over and over and over. And it's all the whole idea is to drive people completely out of these areas so that they can come in and do predatory buying, buy up the land. It's cheaper for them just to do predatory buying than it is to come in and say, hey, we'd like to get a lease with you to mine on your land for these minerals, right? Because they know people aren't stupid. They would figure out about lithium. They would figure out about uranium. They would say, okay, well, I don't want you carving up my land and then leaving me with a big hole, so to speak. So they have to come in and figure out a way to, snatch and grab it. But another part of this investigation in the Panhandle, what I discovered was we have some more high sophisticated equipment. We have the HARP system, which does weather modification, weather manipulation. So I'll give you a good example, like the Hurricane Helene that went through Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. That was manipulated by the HARP system with the intent to disenfranchise as many people as possible, destroy as much as possible, and then deny FEMA funding, deny assistance, and block people from coming in to be able to provide assistance. And then, so this way, the predatory buyers then could come in and start buying up the lands from whoever's left alive, whoever's still there. Because what I found out was that in North Carolina, South Carolina, along the Appalachian Mountains there, it is the second largest lithium deposit in the United States. The first one is actually in the Utah Basin, but the Appalachian Mountains is loaded with lithium and uranium. So besides the coal that we know about, but we do know that they use the HARP equipment. We have all the documentations on that, all the government patents. We also know about the South Pole Station, about how they use it's the largest magnetic frequency resonator. It puts out a large burst of magnetic energy through the ocean, and what it does is to cause the ocean to act erratically and heat up, and then that carries over into the United States, and that's how we've been getting our hurricanes. When you go back and actually look at prior to 1900, you're going to see about one hurricane every 10 to 15 years. And after 1900 forward, you're going to see about one hurricane every 5 to 2 years.
I think it'd be really fun to would you come back on again and we could do another whole show on, say, Antarctica and such?
I can, yeah. I'll be more than happy.
I'm like all kinds of excited to talk to you about this. This is really cool.
I'll be more happy to.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and see how all these systems are kind of interconnected.
They are. They're all interconnected, all run by the deep state, by all these interdepartmental agencies within the presidential executive branch.
Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Well, I appreciate it. Is there anywhere else you want to go today on this, or do we want to come back at a later time?
Anytime you want to do it.
This is really fun for me. I just got to tell you, I like all of these subjects because I want to know what the truth is, no matter where the chips lay on this. It's like we need to make sure that we know the truth and have absolute transparency. Do you know any other people that have been down into the dumps, that worked in the dumps?
I know two other gentlemen that I worked with in the armed security capacity as military contractors. I know one of them, he's actually moved to Hawaii. The other gentleman, I know he passed away like within a couple of months after his contract was up. So
really,
yeah.
Do you wonder if a lot of that stuff is consequence for being there, that they don't want information out?
They do try to keep a pretty good lid on a lot of stuff there. I'm 51 years old. I've been through a lot of things in life, and back in 2013, I decided that I was kind of done being a yes man, and I started getting on the internet, started sharing some things that I know, what things to look for, and hopefully that people will start to wake up. And
what else would you like people to know today?
Well, this is what I want you to know. Everything, the government that you have thought you were funding, that you supported all these years, the surface of it, there's much more below the surface that's far more sinister, more deceptive, not in the interest of the American people. But I will tell you this, as far as this technology goes, this technology has been around since the days of the Watchers and the Nephilim. This is not new. This technology has been here. It just changes hands from one big civilization to the next big civilization. So, We've been lied to a lot, especially in the last 100 years, or I should say 111 years. But so don't always believe everything you see on the mainstream news. A lot of times what they're doing is they're saying, hey, look here, because we don't want you to look over here. They don't want you to use a lot of discernment, critical thinking skills. They don't want you going down that rabbit hole. So I guess I would say the same thing like I tell my kids: question the hell out of everything.
I have to agree with you on that, is that we should be asking a lot more questions, because they have done a real good job at brainwashing people into being good sheeple instead of critical thinkers.
Yeah. And I think this is this is one of the most successful psychological warfare that they have ever done on the American population for so long. I think, like every evil deed, it always unravels after a certain amount of time. God says, okay, starts to unravel things. All it takes is just that one little pebble in the river, and it can start directing the path of that water. And when more and more people start to figure out and start to question the validity of our current government and what they're doing with our tax money, and go, wait a minute, I have to report to the IRS, I have to account for every penny that I make, I spend, and what I buy. Why can't the government do the same thing for us?
Because they don't want to.
Yeah, why isn't there a comptroller? Why can't we go online and say, okay, oh, so they spent $10,000 on a golden toilet, okay, for the White House. They don't show us any of these things. And we constantly hear all the time about the Pentagon losing money, billions of dollars that's just disappeared overnight, right before 9/11, right? We can get into the whole 9/11 thing some other day, and I could tell you some things that I know about 9/11.
Okay, you're coming back next week, because this is just fascinating to me. I think this is absolutely fascinating, because, we gave $12 billion to Assad, and now he's sitting up in Moscow right now. So when I look at this, it's like he either did something really good in their eyes or really bad, and they moved him around to get it's all a coordinated, really evil ballet, a dance, as it were, between the global powers to victimize the people. So, I've had people say, which side of the conflict are you on, the Jewish side or the Palestinian side? I said, I'm not on either side, because I'm not there. And I find the governments and the governance of both absolutely reprehensible. I'm on the side of the people.
Yeah.
Like that's the distinction right there. It's the people that are the ones that are victim. And I'm pretty sure that Papa up in heaven here is getting sick of their nonsense. And it's going to be that moment of, all right, everybody out of the pool. You're done with this nonsense. And and the judgment's going to be painful, which as believers, we have to really inspect and be introspective on our own behavior and whether we're falling prey to their psychological nonsense. That I think they treat us as bad pets. They're just screwing with us full time. We have to realize that there are some good people that they don't even know that they have been already asset captured by the evil that is running, by and large, this entire planet. We just need to get smarter than that and shut them up and kick them out. There are not as many of them as there are of us. Now, granted, they've got some things that we don't have, but we also have things that they don't have. And what we have is, first and foremost, we've got God Almighty. He's only going to let them off the leash just so long. And then it ends up being a really bad day for them that lasts like forever.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that, humanity, the Bible says that humanity, there's nothing is new under the sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't been done before. This type of behavior is almost on repetitious. Humanity, we get so caught up in our own sins that we think nobody's watching. And we can get away with this, or we can get away with that, or we use a lot of justifications for certain actions and stuff. And I got to tell you, as a believer in Jesus Christ, I side with God's people, but I also side with the fact that, there's a lot I don't understand.
There's a lot we don't understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
And hopefully one day, my hope is that, more and more people will go to Jesus Christ, reach out to Jesus Christ, take him up as your Lord and Savior, because at the end of the day, when I wake up in the morning and I open my eyes, that's gratitude for me right there. I don't need anything more than just to be able to open my eyes every day and have another opportunity to live for him, and I think that there's a lot of people that are, I believe a lot of people are demonically influenced, a lot of the rich, the wealthy, like we hear about a lot about this P. Diddy stuff. We hear a lot about the Epstein Island stuff. And, you got ordinary people coming into positions of power. And it's very, very rare that you ever find somebody who actually has a shred of integrity and say, no, I don't want to be a part of this. I see this before it happens, and they say, no, I appreciate the after party invitation, but I got to get home to my wife, or, get home to my kids and stuff. And
if you don't have Jesus Christ as your Savior and you come up against something that's truly demonic, you're going to get eaten alive.
Yep.
And that means from your soul on out. And they know how to do it. They know how to manipulate human beings. And quite honestly, Jesus talked about hell way more than he did about heaven, because he knew the clear and present threat.
Yep.
And that's unfortunate. People think it's a quaint idea, but they've never had to come face to face with pure evil. And that moment, if that moment comes, if you don't have Jesus Christ as your Savior, it's going to be a bad time, because you won't be able to stand.
Right. And my kids, when I was teaching my kids a lot of scriptures when they were younger, and my kids will say, how do you know you can hear the Holy Spirit talking to you? And I said, have you ever heard that inner voice that tells you maybe you shouldn't touch that stove because it might be hot? And my kids will say, yes. I said, that's how you know you're hearing the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's talking. I said, the problem is that we don't listen enough. We don't become still enough to listen and to hear what he has to say, and that's one of the things that I've worked on for, all my life. Because when I was a young child, I had temper problems, I had anger problems, and I had reached out to God and asked him for wisdom in all things. And so he put me through a lot of hardships. And what that did was it taught me to be still, be quiet, and listen, not just for the Holy Spirit, but also what's around me, what people are saying, what are people doing. And you start to take notice of things that most people overlook. And you start to kind of connect things. You start to see things, even predict, certain behavioral outcomes. And you can always kind of anticipate, okay, this is, I see this happening, this moving in this direction or moving into that direction. But I think that's the reason, I think people need to get Jesus in their life. Without him, honestly, it's the blind leading the blind. And sooner or later, one of these days, we stop breathing. that breath of life that He's given us is gone. We're not going to be able to declare Jesus is my Lord. I will say we will declare Jesus is your Lord at the end days, but not at the fashion that you want. Every knee will bow before Him and say Jesus is Lord, but there'll be a sea difference of people. So
I have one more. I don't know if I asked it, but I want clarification. When you were down in the dumps, if you would have said the name of God, would they have toasted you down there or something like that, or what?
no, the Naplums, they get upset. They get very, very aggressive.
They get aggressive if you say the name of God.
Yeah, and then
I remember that.
We'd have to do a containment procedure, and we have to do right up.
Throw a little tizzy fit out there if they hear God's name.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
To them, it's like nails on the chalkboard.
Yeah, well, that's all the more reason to say it, I would say. So, But here you go, throw your tizzy fit and say it until you curl up in a freaking ball and fade away into the nothing that you are. So There you go. So anyhow, here, I'm going to play this. I think this is awesome. I think you'll enjoy this.
Winds in the east, mist coming in, like something is brewing, about to begin. Can't put me finger on what lies in store. I feel what's to happen. All happened before. Winds in the...
I love that clip. I think that's fun. So, yeah, and it goes back to the courage. When you have the courage of God in you, you don't need to be afraid of anything, because He gives us His strength. And I think that's what I'm really enjoying about the discussion with you, is that you have the strength of God in you, so you don't have to be afraid of anything. No. And that's important. When I see somebody with fear, I immediately know that they're not really walking with God, and they probably have a little growth to go ahead of them. And the rest of us who have walked into things that, that perhaps might be a little scary for some people, and that we've had to already face, it becomes kind of like a, sirs, and I don't mean sirs in human form. It's time for you to shut the hell up and sit down. And I think that's kind of interesting. I could talk about that in length, actually. So it's a funny world we live in, and nothing ever is as it appears.
No, and that's the thing is, it's so hard nowadays. People trying to figure out who's who on the internet. Try to put a face to it. It's a lot of work just trying to know if somebody is trying to be honest, true, genuine about, and this is, sincerity. And
I think the Holy Spirit leads us through that. That's why a lot of times believers will say that we know when we're talking to other believers, and there's a spiritual connection that can't be denied. So you see the connection that we have with the Holy Spirit, with God, and your family when you see them.
Yeah.
And you also know the liars when you see them also. God can give us that discernment, see things they don't want us to see. And sucks to be them, everything lays bare before God, and in this day and at the end of time, everything will be uncovered. So I suggest, I'm going to give some mom energy out there. I suggest everybody do the right thing, whether the lights are on or off, whether anyone's there to see you or not, because God's sitting there looking at you, but so are the demons. Yeah. And that's probably not a good thing to open yourself up to your own destruction. He'll help you, he'll save you, but if you walk right into it, to your own destruction, He gives you free will, and that's a lot of responsibility to have, is that free will for your own choices, your own life choices. And those people that are playing ball in the governments, that are bringing destruction to the people, you might really want to think this through, your next move, because it could be your last. And those things are not something to mess with and to play with. This is for real. This isn't a game. This is for real.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. The people that I will say this: 99.9% of the people that are in the government, sitting high up there in elected positions, are not even qualified to be in the position they're in to begin with.
oh my God, they're so dumb. You ever look at these people and go, I can't believe you're in a position of power. I mean, these people are dumb. They're stupid.
Yeah. It's like, and every time I listen to AOC speak, I'm just like, okay, I've got my Sunday morning cartoons or Saturday morning cartoons going on right here. I could just sit and watch her and just laugh my ass off. And it makes me think, though, think about all the people that voted for her, how much dumber that they have to be to vote for somebody like her.
Or for that matter, how much that we didn't know, the Bushes, all of them that got in and that are sitting in a seat got there for some reason. Either they were corrupted and they had something on them.
Yeah.
And actually, this is kind of interesting. I was approached by someone who was actually standing with the cameraman at the last Michigan MI GOP for the Kent County GOP thing. So I know who all these people are. It's interesting. And so you can kind of connect the dots and such. That offered me a stick of blackmail material on every single member of Congress and had the guts to say, if you use this, it will get you in. If it won't, it'll get you killed. And I'm like, there's the door right now. Don't come back again. Not interested in it. Will not accept this. This is all on you. And you probably should make better life choices, right?
Yeah.
But I think that little stick, and I know where they could find this, was probably all the information that Seth Rich had been collecting on them.
Yeah.
Sucks to be them, because guess what? Someone has it. It's amazing they're still alive, and or somebody's got them compromised and they're working with someone, but it's there.
Yeah.
I don't have it because I the only way to win that game is not to play the game. You just sit back and look at them and go, man, you're stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Not on the right side of things. And guess what? It's like God will carry the rest of us, and they're going to just kind of self-destruction. And it's the way it is. They give people the chance to turn around.
It's funny, when I had to go, when I applied for the job to be a military contractor, I can't even begin to tell you how many freaking background checks I have to go through, how many qualifications I have to go through. I have to have experience. I have to have, experience in armed security. I had to have experience in some form of military. I had to have a secret level clearance. I had to. There's so many freaking hoops that I have to literally jump through. I have to take an MMPI 550 personality or what they call the MMPI 550 question, and it's a psychological question, and it shows the doctors whether if you're insane, if you're homicidal, or if you're the type of person that's going to inflict injuries on yourself, or if you're a liar, if you're a chronic manipulator, or just what your personality traits are. We have to take all this stuff. Then we have 2 interviews that we have to go through, and it have to be satisfactory. You don't know what to say. I mean, you can say all the right things and still not get the job. You don't say the right things, and you can end up getting the job. It's weird, but you have to go through all these hoops. You have to take a drug test, a pee test. I have to give them a sample of blood. I got to give them a hair sample. I have to give my thumbprints.
I'm guessing they're not listening to what you're really saying. I'm guessing that they're listening to other things that what's really being said.
Yeah. So you go through all these things, but yet we have government people who are elected, who who have an IQ of a fucking potato, who have no idea what they're talking about. And you get people like myself, or maybe even a farmer, who has to think quickly on his feet, or maybe a steel worker, or, you get somebody that's in the blue collar field, and you put them all of those guys, all these women into Congress. I can almost guarantee you overnight, we're going to see an absolute revolution. We're going to see less government. We're going to see less spending. People are going to be like, this is absolutely insane. Why are we spending all this money? Why are we spending it for this? Giving cocaine to monkeys, why are we
Sleep
giving
on a treadmill.
Yeah, yeah. It's just, and then the whole DEI spending, the money spending on DEI, in other
Which
countries.
they created the problem, so now they got to find a way to make money off of it. Launder their money into the pockets of the useful idiots at the bottom.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramsway coming in with the Department of Government Efficiency. I'm
The only words that I want to hear out of anybody's mouth that's getting into office anywhere is that by the Chevron decision that reversed their power, that we're shutting the doors, we're done with this, and we're going to retool this, because that's what I really think needs to happen. I look at what President Trump has with the FBI and Cash, and I've met Cash, I know Cash, and it's like, you know what he needs to do? He needs to fire the whole thing and shut her down. If they think they're going to screw with him, with the FBI, shut the whole damn thing down entirely. Fire everyone. And then give them a chance to crawl back on their knees and rat out everyone in there. And if they do a satisfactory enough job of ratting them out, maybe we'll give you your job back to do something useful, except in not what this whole organization has been doing. Open the whole record up and let Cash get in there and go in and prosecute everything in that record.
Yeah. I would do that day one.
End it.
If I was him, I would go in. I would pull every single file, and have computer forensics, and they're looking for know what they're looking for, and start pulling up all these files and start stacking them up, and then go through them one by one and say, okay, well, this person did this. They spent government money they didn't get approved for. Okay. Or they withheld information, or they set up an American citizen to be a fall guy for, something, or whatever it is. Then that person needs to be, have a RICO done on them, and then they need to be arrested. And they should be paraded in front of the TV cameras, every single one of them. So we can see this. We can say, okay, all right. Now we see more and more FBI agents, that have committed
CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, HHS, NEA, WHO, all of these people need to be paraded out, and they need to absolutely shut it down. Yep. That's what President Trump needs to do. Shut it down.
And a lot of these, like the CIA agency, this is my belief, but the CIA should be absorbed into the military. We have military intelligence. Okay. Now, post-Desert Storm, we had a clusterfuck of military intelligence was so awful. It was so awful because
I'm not sure the military's got it quite right, though, either.
What's that?
I'm not sure the military's got it all quite right either. I think that there's
no, we don't. But you know what? Here's the thing: is it goes through a by process. So with the military, it's a lot harder to get away with a crime in the military than it is. It's harder, it's harder to get away with the crime. See, with the CIA, they have a lot of what they call backdoor funding. They don't have to report that to Congress because that's not taxpayer-funded operations. So that's why they run a lot of other things. That's how they make, we're talking trillions of dollars worth of other operations and things like this in nature. And we pull them out, and we take all that knowledge and take all the assets, and we give that to our military, which is then under the direction of the commander in chief, which is the president. It's very unlikely that we're going to see a lot of these atrocities happen again, because we don't have a CIA anymore, and everything's under uniform code of justice, through the military. I mean, and being in the military, I know that you've got to walk that fine line. And if you step out of line, I mean, believe me, somebody's going to be there to tell you and remind you to get back in line. And
we've got a lot of brave men and women there that have stepped up into the military. I think it's the leadership, like Millie. Yeah. He should be in the first row of the plane on its way to Gitmo, in my opinion. And some other people have done some bad things. And then, we need to appoint people like, I don't know, let's just say General Flynn or Admiral Rogers or some of the other people that we know and love, that we're willing to take a rubber bullet for this nation. But you know what? I think I would have them on the top of the list to go in there and haul tail on this. Mm-hmm. And I'd probably have Ivan Raiklan sitting in that room too, and probably in the first row of the retribution that's going to be coming towards them. I think I'd have all them sitting there, probably Boone Cutler, and I could probably name a few others that should be in that row too, and let them turn them loose in a beast level way to actually bring some justice to what's happened. Just saying, that's just me maybe, but
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there are people out there that know exactly what I'm talking about. There's some wonderful people out there that could absolutely get in there and make things severely uncomfortable for those who have chosen to do the wrong thing. And wouldn't that be great? It would be every day you'd wake up and you'd just be like, oh yeah, booyah, justice is coming. We got the best of the best in there, and the little wormy pukes are going to be running for the corner. And
and this is interesting because a lot of these people think that they're getting away with a lot of stuff in the past, right? But they don't understand that anything that goes onto the internet is forever. It's literally forever. Just because you scrub it off your laptop, like Hillary Clinton here, just because she scrubbed off 66,000 emails, understand that she used not the DNS server, she used the main public server. All of that information is recorded and is stored. So, people need to understand that, all these people are going to go down. I know
stacking up charges against themselves at this point in time, and they're really dumb. I mean, look at how they try to cover things up. It's like, okay, we're going to do this because we know we're in trouble right now. So Germany collapses, and the people in the one party like resign, all but one, and he goes independent, so he's completely neutered. We've got France out there with Macron and his very manly, as it were, said wife. And then you've got what's going on in Syria with a $12 billion to Assad, who's now sitting his behind over there in Russia. They're all like moving around like crazy. These people are running for the hills, and and why are they running? Oh, I'm pretty extra sure it's the Trump factor. It's the Trump factor that's coming into this, and Papa D ain't gonna play.
No, and this is what I believe about Trump. He's always been the kind of guy who can
he's all cool about it, isn't he?
Yeah, he's just kind of like, hey, we've got this, don't worry about it, and then when you least expect it, then boom, all of a sudden, we're seeing Lisa Page get arrested, or we see Hillary getting arrested. Oh, wait a minute, and this is
no, what happened to the Kenyan? Oh no! Oh my goodness! How can that possibly be? This is what President Trump does. He sets the bait, sets the hook, and just calm and cool, just kind of reels it in. Reels it in, steps back, smiles and waves, and goes on to the next one. It's just a glorious moment, and he's just cool about it. He's like very sophisticated and very cool about this. Oh, I didn't know that happened. maybe this person that knows that happened and he knows exactly what's going on there. People say he's got bad advisors. You're just showing how stupid you are when you say that. He's going to keep people close enough to him to know exactly what they're doing because he's smart. But always, as I always say, smartest guy in the room, no matter what room you're in. That would be General Flynn. And I'd say General Flynn, Admiral Rogers, smartest guy in the room, no matter which room you're in. They're always the smartest guys. Okay.
But it's like they say, some of the smartest people in the world will surround themselves with some of the smartest people in the world. The dumbest people in the world, dumbest people in the room, they will hang with the most dumbest people in the room. So what that saying goes is this: Trump is being the guy that can play chess on a 5D level, okay? And while doing that, listen to the radio, watch the TV, and have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
I think the deep state should be deeply afraid.
I do too.
He's got this little stick. He goes, all right. He goes, you bastards, I'm going to give you enough rope you can hang your own damn selves with it. And then when the time
he surrounds himself with both the dumb guys as well as the smart guys, and he's playing them all.
Yes.
That's what's going on here. And he's got really smart guys like General Flynn and Admiral Rogers, and they're sitting back. I'm pretty sure they're sitting back at the end of the day smoking a cigar and going, man, this was a great day. Did you watch that guy squirm over there? That was worth everything we put into that little effort. And, and watch him yip for the corners, just like, let's just say the Nephilim and Satan and all of them, they're going to be squirming like the little pukes they are. And it's going to be awesome when after Papa D gets done with, handing them their tail, it's going to be the real big guy that's going to land. And that moment is going to be everybody out of the pool if he doesn't torch it all first, which that's not out of the realm of possibility too. So, well, this is great to talk with you. I want to talk more. And so it's like, I'm like, okay, we got to talk about Antarctica. We got to talk about all this other stuff too, because I'm fundamentally interested in this. So very interested. And I've never talked to anybody that was actually admit to being down in the dumps. They'll kind of admit to it, but not really. So this is awesome. So at any rate, well, let's end today with a prayer. And would you like to pray or would you like me to pray?
You know what? This is your show. I'll let you pray.
Oh, it's our show. I just facilitate the conversation. Honestly, I just turn the camera on and I run things here. But it's all of our show. If we're getting the truth out, it's for all of us. And everyone has the right to speak and have their opinions be heard. And nobody knows more or has more of a weight than anybody else. Everyone has the right to say what's it. And the wisdom that God puts in each of us, we honor that wisdom and those talents and the way that they see things by honestly realizing that we all stand together as one family, not with the Nephilim, but with each other here. Okay. These guys are on the wrong side of everything. And so, it's just the way it is. And, or demons or whatever you want to call them. Bad choice. Very, very poor choice. Poor life choices. Why would we listen to these idiots? They couldn't make a choice for their own lives, No. So we'll let them go into Idiotville over here, and we're going to hang together as family defending each other. But I'll pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so very much for guiding us and walking us through all situations. And we're so thankful that you carry us as we go. And it's only by your strength, by your love, with your discernment, with the wisdom that you are imparting to us, not in the long term, but as we walk with you step by step through this life in the direction you want us to go. We always want to honor you and glorify you in everything we do, because we're nothing. We're just here. We're your kids. We want to be like you, and we want to learn to be more like you every single day, knowing that you sent your only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, to pay for our sins so that we have a way to walk with you, talk with you, and know that we are your children, and you want to be with us. That's a beautiful thing to know, that it meant so much to you, that you did not abandon us, but that you stayed with us, and that you'll never abandon us. And we just accept your gift of salvation, of eternal life through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the only one that was perfect and also didn't throw a stone, but he came to help us. And we ask that you would open people's eyes to the truth. Let them know, let them actually see the reality of what happens when you go in the wrong direction and you start dancing with demons, and may it terrify them enough that they come running back to you and see the difference with your love, salvation, with a hope, with the hope in all things and the peace that we can live together as we go forward as your family. And we're just thankful for that. Please keep everybody safe. If people are afraid, give them the ability to stand courageously in all situations and not be manipulated. And we just want to let you know that we love you so very much. And I ask for your protection for Shawn this day and every day, that you would give him your ultimate protection to surround him, and that no evil could come near him, that you would confuse every plan of the enemy, that when the name Jesus, Yeshua, Yahweh is spoken, that they would run for the darkest corner to get away from the fact that Jesus is Lord. You are our Savior. You are our Father. You're a provider, our banner, our everything. And we humbly are thankful to be with you and be loved by you. In Jesus Christ's precious name we pray, amen.
Amen.
There we go. Okay, boys and girls, this is the part of the show where we go to bing, 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 go to brandenburgergovernor.com, because I'm the best non-conceder who's ever not conceded in the history of the United States of America. And I would like to have a discussion with the rightful president of the United States, President Donald J. Trump, in cowboy boots, about said activity of non-conceding. And so that day is going to happen. And but at any rate, everybody out there, know that you're loved. God came here in order to walk with us. He created us, and anything that's demonic, they're just pukes. Okay, they're just little squirming pukes. You don't have to be afraid, but you need the protection, the blood of Christ protecting you. You can walk through anything and not be afraid. Okay, because you're going to put them on notice. They don't get to go anywhere that they want. They're like on a little pathetic leash, which is kind of sucks to be them. Proves that they're bad decision makers. And so don't follow them into their nonsense, because they're only there to deceive you and tell you that things are good when it's really bad, and it's only going to work for your demise. Don't go down that path. Stay close to God, and he will make your path straight. He will keep you out of ultimate trouble. Doesn't mean we're not going to go through some tough times. That's not part of the deal. When you sign up for this, you're going to go through some tough times, but it's worth it. And those tough times for believers just make us stronger, smarter, knock the rough edges off us a little bit, and teach us to be more like him, so that we can stand strong, just like our Papa does, like God Almighty. So with that said, God bless you all. God bless all those whom you love, and God bless America. Make it a great day. It's a choice. It's a choice every day to be mentally strong, to keep your heart safe, in the hands of God Almighty, so we don't get bitter or downtrodden or anything like that. Go to God, and he will provide for you. Stay on the line, Shawn. I'm going to end the broadcast, and we'll see you tomorrow. Let's see. I've got Bob Nowicki going to be on tomorrow, and Sheila Calhoun talking about the politics in Macomb County, which really is one of those things that make or breaks the elections, fraudulent elections in Michigan. We're going to talk about it anyway. And then Bob Cushman is going to be on, and we're going to be talking about corruption in Michigan. We're going to keep kicking this beast until we kick the crap out of it, and it decides not to rear its ugly head again, because that's what we do, right? We're going to continue on this thing until we absolutely right this thing in the name of Jesus Christ is what's going to happen. So we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. You're loved.
Maybe can I add something real quick before we take off?
Go ahead.
So for all of those who want to watch the Panhandle documentary, you can go to my X or Twitter, and it's at home HOMESEC consult, or you can go to my YouTube channel. It's the Freedom Garden Club show. And
I think I've got it up here, so let me share this a minute before we end it. Here we go. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep.
And then you can go there. I'll put that on my Telegram channel too. So that's
the director's cut. Now I have what they call the docu-series, which is about 12 hours long, but then that's broken up in 2-hour segments, 2-hour shows. And that really gets into where this is where we get down to the meats and potatoes of the entire documentary. So if you're kind of interested in that kind of stuff and want to go down that rabbit hole, go ahead and watch that.
Oh, I'm going to be binge watching this. Are you kidding me? This is going to be one of those things that Brandenburg binge watches this and wants to know every single thing that you found. Now you've really got my attention here. That's all I can say. So we're going to have Shawn back on again, and we will see you tomorrow. And I will post the links too that Shawn gives me. I'll post those all on my Telegram channel, as well as the links to his stuff, so that we can support and get the word out there of what Shawn's done, the good work that he's done. So hang on the line, Shawn, and then we'll see you all there tomorrow. Too bad you can't be part of this conversation. This is going to be great when we get offline, because we always talk afterwards, and this is like, I probably should record it sometime, but maybe not.